Hey, and welcome back to another episode of A Musician and a Filmmaker. Today, a very special episode indeed. We have two back-to-back interviews with two members of our favorite band, Animal Collective. The first interview, Greg did in person on the release date of Isn't It Now, September 29th, with Brian Weitz, aka Geologist. The second interview, one I did over the interwebs with Josh Dibb, aka Deakin. Let's get right into it. Here's Greg's interview with Geologist.
Well, how are you feeling? Today's the album release date.
I feel good. I mean, it's been strange for us to be out here on the road and kind of wrapped up in our solo sets. And Josh and Noah are, in Europe doing these listening parties. But the four of us have been talking every day and trying to remind I think for them it feels a little bit more real because they're listening to the record every day. Or to be honest, they're probably leaving the room, but they're nearby and answering questions and stuff. So for us, yeah, it's, driving on tour, it's like you kind of almost forget what day of the week it is.
Oh, I know exactly, because I shoot video for my friend's band, and they just started touring, and it was even 2 days in, you're just like, wait, what day even is it? I don't even know, because every day feels like it's 3 days long.
Yeah, Dave was just saying there's a band called Simande, and he was just saying that he has one of their songs stuck in their head, but he wasn't facing me on the street when he said it, and there was a lot of cars going by, and so I just heard something mumbling about Simande, and I was like, it's not Monday. I was like, I'm not quite sure, but it's definitely not Monday. And then he was like, no, it's not what I said at all. and, but just goes to show, and we've already talked about, Josh and Noah text on the band group chain, happy release day, and love you guys, hope it's going well over there, but still, for a moment, forgot that it was Friday, even.
So did you guys graduate to a text chain over an email chain?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been that way for a long time, but
I got you.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I recall when Kind of Bonkers came out, y'all talking about how that was born out of the email chain of an experiment to try to write a song piece by piece.
Yeah. Uh-huh. We're going to try and do a whole EP that way, but I think that was the only one we finished.
Well, it's just interesting how, I guess, speaking of Kind of Bonkers, sort of how I guess that song was in the pipeline for something 6 years before it got a release, and then of course here we are now, and we're at Isn't It Now's release date, and Music Box was March of 2018. So it's got to be relieving to finally go from that first little sketch period to having it fully realized and having mass audiences be able to discover these songs instead of just people going, hey, have you heard the Music Box set?
Yeah, it feels great. I mean, for me, I think the relief came when it was done and just knowing it was gonna come out in the world. It coming out now is it's bittersweet in some ways because there was a push and pull between wanting to get it out really quickly for precisely what you just said. It's been a long time, but also we like to tour when the record comes out and play those songs. But it's for you said, these songs we've been playing in some form or another for over 5 years. And also last year was a heavy touring year, really heavy, in addition to all the cancellations for COVID that came with it. And it was just stressful. And when you're going to book a tour these days, you usually have to do it between 8 and 12 months out. So once we set a release date for September, it was really just after New Year's, early 2023. And we were in no headspace to consider touring again, and normally we wouldn't. This would be kind of the year where he would do solo stuff. And we wouldn't even put out an Animal Collective record, but because we wouldn't have one to put out, so it coming out now and not being able to promote it in the way that we normally promote it, that's a sad thing, to us, that we just knew we wouldn't be ready to tour it.
Well, I saw that you were talking to someone about how, a lot of it is also just the fact that you guys are so busy, not in the band's capacity, your solo careers and your full band stuff can often overlap in terms of, the allotted advances or budgets or what have you that you have to deal with having a label. So
yeah, for sure.
It definitely makes sense that, the promotion this time around wasn't as strong as Time Skips, but I think that might have just been because, and this is me just speculating, it might just be because, Time Skips was 6 years after Painting With, and it was after that whole pandemic wait, so it might have just been the boys are back in town kind of hype.
Yeah, for sure. And for us too. I mean, I think we had energy at that time to do things like rehearse and tour and spend time with each other on video sets and all the things that you normally do, but in part because we hadn't seen each other in a long time. So that was different. But like I said, trying to like start thinking about that and scheduling it like right after having to cancel a tour in Europe about a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, it was just like hard to think and like just get ourselves in that frame of mind. So,
well, I guess as far as the songs themselves being on a record, is it, because I recall you guys recorded at least what we at the time thought was the entire album in like November or December of 2021.
For Isn't It Now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole
in
thing. Yeah.
New York.
Mhm.
And then you guys did a couple of later sessions.
Those were just mixing sessions.
Oh, okay. There wasn't any like overdubs or anything?
Not that I recall. Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Well, basically, I guess what I'm getting at is that...
I mean, maybe like we replayed a keyboard line in mixing, like, you know what I mean? But like if we did it, because we've done that in the past, like normally like somebody might hear something and be like, I just wish I played that like slightly better, and someone's like, well, just go see if there's a synth in the key, and like, and let's just plug it in and do it over. But it wasn't anything like significant. Like nothing was like changed in the songs, But honestly, I can't remember if that happened for this record or not.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that because you guys recorded it back then, of course the fans hear that, and I think we heard that around like, I think when I saw y'all in Atlanta at the Eastern in March of 22, I think that had just
That's my birthday.
been announced. Yes, that was a great show.
Thanks.
And
I had COVID that day.
oh, really?
I mean, I didn't know at the time, but
Yeah, that's actually a funny story. When you guys rescheduled the Dallas shows, or the Dallas and the Austin shows, because of COVID, I went to Emo's in Austin and then drove back to Dallas the next day to see it at the Grenada, I think. But I think Emo's was the one where I got COVID but didn't know it until the shows were already over, and so I had to say, hey, everyone that was around me, just double check that you didn't get it also, because I'm sure there was a pin getting passed around.
I had to do that for that tour too. I mean, I think I got it in Nashville a couple days prior. There was like I woke up in the hotel, and before like we got in the van, I wanted to get a bagel, and I like mapped to a bagel place on my phone, but I didn't like quite see that the highway was in the way, and like on the map. So it said it was like a really long walk, like an hour walk or something, and I was like, it can't be. It's like right there. And then like when I went to go do it, I was like, oh, well, it's because the highway is in the way, and you have to walk around. And there was a Waffle House like literally right there, like in front of me when I made this realization. I was like, oh, I'll go in the Waffle House. And nothing, like I love Waffle House. I'm not saying like
it's always a great pick.
Yeah, I'm not saying you get COVID at Waffle House, but like when I walked in, it was packed, and like there was only one seat at the counter, and the guy that I was sitting next to was just like coughing like crazy, and it was the kind of thing where I just knew. And then that was like 2 days before that Atlanta show, and then I drove home and started feeling sick. Like that was because that was the last day of the tour.
Yeah,
and I started feeling
you
sick.
sort of lucked out that it was.
Yeah, I felt sick immediately, like it's like getting back to DC, and yeah.
Yeah, it's that brain fog can immediately like start setting in. I think the worst part of it was for me, like when I was recovering, I would like start a thought process, get halfway through, and then just give up because I didn't have enough mental energy to finish a thought.
Yeah,
it's how
I heard that happened to a few people. Luckily, like we were working on that movie, The Inspection,
which I saw in theaters.
Oh, sweet!
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I can't say there was anyone else in the room, but I was there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, we got back and we had like a Zoom with the music editor and the director and everything just like a few days after that tour, and we got on, and I couldn't even turn on my camera. I was just like in a ball, sweating and like shivering. And they're like, we essentially need this score done in the next 10 days, and like it's 4 weeks worth of work that you're gonna have to cram into 10 days. So like when I finished that score, like while dealing with COVID, I had an emergency room visit in the middle of it. It was like, so thank God the brain fog didn't happen to me. I just had the thing where I couldn't really even walk a few blocks to do errands without having to find like a wall to sit down against for a while to catch my breath.
So the question I was trying to get to was, because you guys recorded these songs so long ago, relatively, and the fans, they think, I think a lot of people just assume that as soon as you finish recording something, you can just hit upload, but when you're in a professional band with a label and you're in a studio and all this, higher quality stuff, you have to, there's a process that you have to go through.
There's the difference between tracking and mixing. So we were just referring to tracking at that point. We didn't mix it until April, and then I don't think then we had to fix like another session in September, about a year ago. So
are you just used to that? Have you been in a band long enough to where that cycle is just like, it doesn't even phase you anymore? Like the delay between recording something and getting it pressed on vinyl, for example?
No, because it's a little different than it used to be. It used to be such that, I mean, I'm a little used to like we track and then we take a break and, we leave the studio with rough mixes from tracking and then people listen to it and like we discuss mix ideas like, what are we thinking here for this song, or is there something throughout the whole record, like a mixing choice we want to make? Like we take some time, it's a little different than, this record we might have been able to do it because it's a little bit more straightforward in terms of its instrumentation, but it's not like you're just get a good drum sound and a good bass and then like, balance the elements. Like for us, there's a lot more going on in the mix. So, and some of us have families and, significant others like partners, and we can't just devote the whole time. So we're used to the break between the tracking and the mixing, but we used to then like mix and get it mastered and send it to the record label. And 3 months later it was on the shelf,
But does that on the shelf period, does that frustrate you ever? Are you ever just like...
A little bit, yeah. But I mean, dude, now it's not even 3 months. Now it's like 8 months. And because like vinyl's way more popular than it used to be, and a few vinyl pressing plants have closed. So there's like this, and like people
and,
like
Taylor Swift is doing 4 versions of her
exactly.
era's album, and so there's just this giant
and
backlog.
more power to her. Like I don't, but
no, but
they're gonna press hers before they press ours.
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
So now it's, I would kill for it to be like 3 months, like it used to be. But yeah, it's always felt a little bit like once it's done, we want to get it out there. And it used to be dictated more by print media, like magazines. When we started working on this schedule, it was like 2004 or something, 2004, when like magazines wanted to talk to us and we actually had to think about it, not just like, oh, it gets back from the pressing plant and then you send it to stores. So you would have to like have the record done, send it out, and then people would let you know if they wanted to photograph you or interview you for a print feature. And the print time for magazines was 3 months. So like it was always dictated by that, and we were a little resentful, I think, that you had to wait just because a magazine, wanted to do a photo shoot or something. But
is it still a 3-month wait now, like to send out the press thing?
I don't know, because it's so everything is so much more digital now. Like podcasts, things like this, like you all don't need like kind of the legacy, old school print media stuff. It's not like the driving force of your coverage anymore. So, but so now it's really just those like the shipping, like the supply chain causes the delay now, not the media.
That's basically whatever I tell people whenever they're like, "Stupid Domino, why isn't it out now?" I'm like, for reasons beyond their control, if you can believe that.
Yeah, Domino's a good record label.
Yeah,
they really are. They don't.
I can attest to that because they sent me an advanced copy of Defeat, the promo vinyl,
nice.
And I didn't even ask.
And that was their idea. Like I would love.
That was their idea. I would
love to say like we love the fact that people are so dedicated, and the only reason Domino would suggest that kind of thing is because they know that we like to do that kind of stuff. But that idea, and I think for the puzzle for Dave when he did Eucalyptus, like people were sent a puzzle. I don't know like where Domino got the idea, but they definitely like brought it to us as early as Eucalyptus and said like, when we send fans like these surprise things in the mail physically, like they really like it, and you guys have the fan base that we think would appreciate it more than anybody. So when you put stuff out, if we can think of an idea far enough in advance, we should do it. So they got ahead of it with the Defeat like a long time ago. When we said we wanted to release it as a single, they said like, oh, this, because some of the Domino people are on, like they watch the message boards and stuff. So if you insult them, they'll see it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I got to tell people to be careful,
Yeah. But they knew, like, right, they were like, it's great. Defeat is going to be on the record. It's great. You guys want to put it out. We see how much people are excited about that song. And like, we're going to go through and we're going to, like, they were the ones that knew that like picked the people essentially, like based on comments they saw people making on the message board. So like not every record label would take the time to do that, let alone to think of the idea, and then let alone to like kind of make sure that like it was executed in that way. And
well, yeah, I was actually going to ask if there was ever a point where you guys as the band considered splitting Defeat into multiple tracks, at least on the list, like digitally, or just like A, B, and C, or if it was always meant to just be one big.
Yeah, it was always meant to be one big thing. The only discussion about it was ever came up was like, should it be on the record? Essentially, I mean, we didn't know what to do for Isn't It Now in terms of the track listing, and we really wouldn't have known what to do if the pandemic hadn't happened. You know, because everything but Soul Capture was written at that point, and so I don't know how many songs that would that be like. Somewhere between like 16, 20 songs.
Right. I think there was speculation that the second album would be like just like an extended EP, or like Defeat would be an EP, and then the album would be like, because there were so many longer songs y'all were debuting around that time.
Had we gone and recorded everything though in like early 2020, because we were looking at like April or May for studio dates, and we were going to record everything, and we really had no idea like what to do. Like we were not going to go into that with a plan of like, this is going to be the record, and these are going to be the EPs, and these are going to be B-sides. Like we felt good about everything, so we had no idea, and it was like this tough choice, and maybe like a tough conversation, and like a tough meeting that was going to like lie at the end of it, and then COVID just kind of picked for us, right, and like kind of gave us 2 records.
Well, I think that first week in October 2019, when y'all debuted that material, I was at that Tulsa show when y'all were first playing the new stuff.
I like playing there a lot.
Yeah, they have great sound there, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's great. And we all like J.J. Cale a lot, so it's nice to play in his zone.
Yeah, and then like throughout that week, y'all were debuting more and more material, and then like by the end of it, we're tallying up. There's like 15 new songs, and we're like, looking at the bootlegs, it's roughly an hour and a half of new music. As a fan, you're like, are they about to make a double album like for the first time ever?
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, yes, but maybe not the way that, in traditional Animal Collective style fashion, not the way people would expect.
Yeah.
As other people do.
Yeah, we didn't know. I mean, and taking Defeat off would have been the easy thing, and making a Defeat EP would have been the easy thing, but that was such like a totemic song for us, like going back to that Music Box performance. And even when Dave sent the demo, it was only like an 11-minute song, but it still had all those parts, and like as more lyrics were written or whatever, and like we kind of jammed from part to part, it became what it is now, and it just encapsulated so many of the different vibes of the record. And really was like the song and the Music Box that made us feel like when Josh and Dave and I were working on it in the few days leading up to that performance, we were like we have an idea of something. Like this is gonna, when everyone's done whatever solo stuff we were working on then, like we have it now. Like we see it. We see where we're going next. So the idea of leaving Defeat off was always left a bad taste in our mouth, and we didn't, in the end, we decided not to do it anyway.
Well, I think a lot of fans, myself included, sort of speculated that because Defeat was the closer of the Music Box set, and there is this sort of like grandiose finality to it. Not that it would be your last song ever or anything, but I think most people assume that, if it's going to be on an album, it'll be the closer because it is this big epic closing thing, and it could take up an entire side of a vinyl.
I had the same thought. That was I pushed for it to happen that way, but some people in the band felt like it actually would leave the impression that you thought of. Like, is it too much of a downer? No, I think the ending's really optimistic, it was funny, like when even the 4 of us talk about it. Like, did you ever see this Swedish movie called Let the Right One In, like the vampire movie?
I saw that in the subpar American remake, like back to back, just to compare. I need to rewatch the original, though.
It's really good. I actually just watched it not that long ago, again. And I remember at the time, like, people thought the ending was really pessimistic. Like for those who haven't seen it, it's like
spoiler alert.
Yeah. So there's like this girl vampire, but it turns out she's really old. She's just been stuck as like a 11 or 12-year-old, and she has that like older man who you think is her father, but then like he dies. She almost like, and then she kind of replaces him with her friend who's like another 12-year-old boy, and they run off together. And people thought it was this pessimistic ending, like, oh, well, he's going to age and she never is. And so, like, essentially you're just watching, like, a loop. And you just watched one loop end, and now, like, another loop's beginning, and, like, he's going to grow up to be the old man who eventually dies or she kills, and when she meets another person her age. And I remember that was posed to the director. Like, I watched a Q&A or something with the director, and he was just like, oh, that's a bummer you all think that. Like, that never occurred to me. He was like, I never saw my movie that way at all. Like, it was, to me, it was like such a sweet love story and such like a hopeful, romantic, optimistic ending. And like, I never saw that dark side. Whether he was being honest or not, I don't know. But
is the ending scene Is it the one with the pool and the bullies, or is that like
It's right after.
Is it right after that?
It's
and
when they're
like,
when they're on the train and he has like a trunk and
Right.
they're like doing the little Morse code
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, and that seems like a well, because if you want to sit here and get pedantic about vampire laws, I mean, she could easily bite him at one point, and they could last forever
True,
together
yeah.
if they wanted. But I think it's also just that they found a companion in each other, and they're
Yeah. So that's the way Defeat was a little bit for us, where I've always, I mean, I hear a lot of like melancholy in the song.
but it's like a bittersweetness.
Yeah, totally. And I think the ending for me has always left me in this place of feeling like acceptance and also optimism or like empowerment that like you can accept something or move on and what regardless of whatever the specific subject matter is. I think other people in the band felt like, oh no, that's a downer ending, and like also like the word like Noah was even like, well, Defeat's like the I'm probably giving you too much inside baseball here, but Noah was like Defeat's like the thing from like this era, like that's what the record should be like, instead of calling it like isn't it now, like I want it to be called Defeat, and other people were like that just makes it seem like we're giving up or like we've been defeated,
Right.
or something, you know what I mean? And it was like, no, it was like that's not really what I'm getting at. It's just like that's the thing, and then the only reason we didn't do that was because like we did the single called Defeat, and we were like to have like a single called Defeat and the record Defeat, and then Isn't It Now was like what we chose, and we all grew to like that better. Like what was in the discussion, we grew to like that better. But yeah, we knew that song, that title, those lyrics, like could sort of implant ideas in people's heads, and I still wanted to be last on the record. That was another thing. Like a lot of times we have sequences, and like we're all like we just know it, and I think for a long time we assumed Defeat would be last, and then all of a sudden, like everything I just recounted, so we stuck it in the middle.
You know the movie Clerks, right?
Yeah.
Dante, his famous line when they're talking about which is better, Return of the Jedi or Empire Strikes Back, and Dante goes, I like Empire because it's got a downer ending, and that's all life is, a series of down endings, which of course he's a pessimist cynic at that point in the movie, so it makes sense from his perspective. But that quote always stuck out in my head. Anytime someone's like, nah, it's too much of a downer, I'm like, life's full of downers. But that's the point of the song, is that you just pick yourself back up and you keep going, and then you get knocked. It's like the Chumbawamba song that everyone loves, which, by the way, I'm expecting a cover of at some point in the future. So you did mention that Defeat was floated as an album title before Isn't It Now came around. Were there other album titles y'all considered that you would want to, is that too personal, or is there anything you'd want to?
There probably were.
Nothing that comes to mind.
Nothing that comes to mind. We always joke about like growing up playing piano lessons and hearing like the composer, like we would call him like Claude Debussy, and like that you can say, if being from Baltimore, like you can really like lean into like the O's, so like we sometimes joked about how we all say like Debussy with a Baltimore accent, and I've always wanted to call one of our records that, like Debussy with a Baltimore accent, and I thought this might be the one because there's some classical vibes, but those guys wouldn't go for it. They thought it was too jokey, which it is, but
Yeah, well, I think a lot of fans assume that Magician's from Baltimore because it is such a like specific and a very Animal Collective title that would be the record title. If you were going to name an album after a song, which I know isn't your MO necessarily, or perhaps Sea of Light, the lyric from Genie's Open, of course, that was the original acoustic version's name. And then because I think there is that correspondence between Time Skiffs and Isn't It Now, where they come from the same initial batch, that in the title there would also be a thematic similarity, like you're writing a time skiff on the Sea of Light or something like that, But again, that's why we love Animal Collective, is because you guys always do the thing that we never expect.
Yeah. Magicians never came up as a title. And there were no other songs where we thought like that would be the title other than Defeat. So yeah, aside from my jokey title, I don't really remember. But.
Well, I still, for one, think Dave's idea to change the band's name to the Painters for an album would have been great.
Oh, yeah?
Because we already got Campfire Songs, which I know was retroactively.
It would have been going back to our thing.
Yeah.
Dave and I still do it. We decided to start naming our side projects other things from Animal Collective, and they're low profile enough that Domino doesn't care if, that Domino doesn't even put them out, so...
Yeah, speaking of, New Psychoactives just did a Volume 3 with the Bug Mall installation. Is there any is that just like sort of a thing where like you have ideas saved up and then you come to Dave with it, or, you know, vice versa? Or is it like you're like, I'm in the mood to make something, let's just do like a new Psychoactives and have fun with it, and there's no pressure?
So the first two are like that. The first two new Psychoactives. Bug Mall are friends who run Drop of Sun Studios in Asheville. There's like also a gallery kind of art residency space. And we had close friends, Glow Space Arts, the art group in Asheville. They actually do Dave's T-shirts that he wears on stage every night, and also the ones he sells on tour.
Oh, cool.
And they were doing this full installation called Bug Mall in this artist residency space in West Asheville. And they reached out to Dave about doing music, and he asked me, like, and they were like, it is what it sounds like. It was like, I'm all for bugs, was
right.
like what the thing looked like. And he wanted to work on it they brought him the idea. He wanted to work on it as a duo, and we didn't discuss like what it would be at all as we were working on it. We threw out like it should be somewhere between like 40 and 50 minutes of music, and so because it was going to loop nonstop. So we wanted to think about how much time someone might spend in there, and yeah, I don't know, I can't remember how many songs we did.
Was the Painting With debut at BWI, did that influence that decision at all, like the runtime thing? Because you guys did loop that album for like 12 hours.
No, I can't remember. That Dave might have even gotten like a request from the artists about that time limit. So I can't remember, but it was after it was done, and they said like, what do you guys want us to credit you at, like when, once the thing opens. It opened around New Year's last year, or like during the holidays in December. And we just did it in like a few weeks, and I think we worked on it for 2 weeks, and we're really psyched on it. I can't remember the exact. I think Dave just like called me and was like, "Hey, they need to like list us as the musicians. What are you thinking?" Like and then we were like, "I think we might have just made New Psychoactives Volume 3. Like let's like it kind of this feels more like that than wanting to be Aviator Geologist or Animal Collective," and so that's how it came to be.
And as far as like the future of that project, is that just like a thing where if the idea comes along, you will fall into the motion of it, or is it something you just like you wake up one day, you go, I want to make a new Psychoactives?
It's both. I mean, Dave, like we always intended Animal Collective to feel like some sort of an ecosystem or a universe that would have different organisms and niches and areas to go. And it's tough again because I don't really like go on the message boards or social media that much, but I do get the sense. I mean, because I meet people on the road, we do have like a lot of younger fans that have almost come up, like seeing things a little bit more separate than we see them in terms of like, and not that's on them. Like we operate this way because of the music industry, that like there's like records that we promote and we tour that are more like song based.
The mainline albums.
Yeah, and they're like more like trad or like.
Well, that's also a subject of debate, like what constitutes mainline, like Odd Sack or Hulland Again.
Yeah, or Tangerine
like
Reef or,
right,
all that stuff. I mean, we take all those projects as maybe, I mean, it's tough because like to do like, that's a good phrase, mainline album. Like they usually like require more resources and getting together and, things like Bug Mall, Dave and I made completely remotely. It was just like we had like a shared session online, and it's all we wanted to make like an all synthesizer record. Like I don't know if you've heard it, but it's like it's all synths, like either my modular. There's like even things that sound like field recordings are like not field recordings on there.
What I like about Bug Mall is that it's a little deceptive because you get like the first 20 minutes that's like sort of that ambient meeting of the waters, Amazon rainforest kind of soundscape, and then you get to like where the actual like there's like a couple hidden like real pop songs with a beat in there, which I mean,
we just thought about spending a day at the mall, and we were like, if like someone had like was just making like a documentary, like a like an invisible camera floating through the mall, and
like a cinema verite kind of
thing.
And
there's be like, so maybe like the first half we talked a lot about like you're just kind of hanging around like the fountain in the atrium, and there's like the bird that's like gotten stuck and it's like flying up there, and then it was like, oh, and now this is when like because we grew up in the 80s and like going to malls, and and now it's like kind of back with the Stranger Things, people are like into that aesthetic and that thing.
Yeah, I think more people get liminal space photos from malls nowadays than they do like products.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. We went to one today actually. We went to see the Meow Wolf thing.
Yeah, I went to the one in Santa Fe for this tour. I'd never been there before to any Meow Wolf.
For
and that
Animal
was
Collective or for AV
for AV. Did the whole art exhibit, saw the show. It was a great experience. And then this place opened up like 2 months after we went to that. So I'm still waiting to go to that one. Because, you know,
cool.
It's a big tourist attraction. Everyone's going to go and
It wasn't
explore.
that packed. It was cool.
Well, it also depends on what time you want to.
That's true. We
available.
were there at like 1 today or 12. But yeah, then the second side, we were like, oh, this is when like the shopping spree montage happens, or like now we're in the food court and these are like the condiment pumps, like, you know, operating as if they're selling. This is like now it's holiday season and there's like a train, you know, display or something. So we thought a lot about like what would you experience, like we thought about like our mall memories and just kind of like shot them back and forth to each other. And then in specific malls too, like the mall I grew up going to outside of Philadelphia, like lots of things. And as we like kind of went through them back and forth, we just picked out different moods and like scenes or memories that we essentially wanted to soundtrack. And that's what became, you know, Bug Mall. We like doing those things because it's really a side of us that we want to express. And we hope it's people that are into Animal Collective have like a broad range. But even if they don't, it's cool that they can pick and choose the sides of Animal Collective they like. But Dave and I definitely have that side to us, and it's hard to know when we'll be inspired. But we have another thing too that we did that is not New Psychoactives, and it had to be billed as Animal Collective. It was on that Audubon. There was like a compilation for the Audubon Society. I don't know if you've heard that.
Oh,
it's a song called Brown Thrasher.
Yes.
And that's like, he does all the acoustics and I do all the electronics. Although I played hurdy-gurdy on that track, and we really loved making it. And so we've talked about like, and that felt a little different to us than Animal Collective, even though it was kind of in the Meeting of the Waters zone. But we've thought about like, should that be another side project, like continuing down that road, like exploring that combination of him just handling all the acoustics and me handling all the electronics, you know?
Well, it's definitely fascinating to see how the different combinations of the four of you working as Animal Collective have appeared over the years, like Josh and Noah doing Noah's Ark in Japan, or you and Josh doing Suspend the Time.
Yeah, and Josh and I do most of Dave did a little on inspection, but Josh and I do most of the scoring stuff together. And like that, you know, again, for like promotional reasons is released as Animal Collective.
Right.
But he and I like collaborate a lot on those. Like we just did another one this summer, but the film's not out yet, but it was for a documentary on like jetty construction in Rockaway. It's like beautiful, kind of impressionistic thing about the construction of the jetties post Hurricane Sandy. So we did like a whole nother score this summer that hopefully will be released as well. Well,
I just watched a few documentaries about the Crofts, the French couple that were like the volcanologists. Then they like...
Oh, I heard about it. Then they got like vaporized.
Yeah, in Japan they got like wiped out.
I heard that is
with like no time.
Watching,
but I'm watching it and I'm like, if this wasn't a Werner Herzog movie, I can see this having an Animal Collective score to it. Because it is sort of just like the extreme opposite of like a Tangerine Reef.
Yeah. Where
you have all these relaxing, bright colors and then you got, you know, death and destruction.
Some of his soundtracks, you know, did you see Encounters at the End of the World?
Yes.
Yeah, and he's like listening to all those underwater recordings of seals. Yeah, we used all that stuff on, not that, like, but even prior to that, we had used it because, like, you know, I used to work in marine science in DC, so I had access to some recordings. So if you listen to Sea Lying on Water Curses, it's actually like very similar recordings from the Arctic of like the same species that like he's listening to through the ice.
Cool.
You know,
I
that's
didn't know
like.
That. Well, I actually I took a 20th century composers class in college because it was part of like the core for my major, which was just movie and film and stuff. And they brought up, speaking of Debussy.
Say it with a Baltimore accent.
Yeah,
That's
Debussy.
all I know how to do.
In the ocean. We had to basically compare like a song that we knew that isn't a classical work to a classical work that was like on a list. And so I think it was like Estampes, I don't actually know. It's like a well-known Debussy selection, but I used Sea Lying as my comparison for my paper, and pretty sure I got an A on it. So
that definitely influences a lot of Dave's piano playing, especially from back then.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that anytime something has like marine-related animals or creatures in the title that you have a heavy influence on it, like Baleen Sample, which I don't even think you were there for.
No, I wasn't.
Right.
But Sea Lying, I definitely brought that like underlying sound collage of just the electronics and the seals. The Weddell seals is what the species is. And I brought those, and I brought some samples of walruses that we eventually used on Cuckoo Cuckoo. But they were just to like use like in songs, but for seal eyeing, like whatever like bed of sound I made, we ended up not like chopping up into other samples, and I don't remember how that song started, but like what took shape. But it basically was like, I'm gonna play this thing, and then like the rest of the guys just kind of played on top of it. You know?
Well, it's always interesting to hear like how you can incorporate stuff that you record out in the field or whatever on the record. Like, for example, on Merriweather Post Pavilion, you use like crickets as part of the percussion or like the rhythm section. And then I think recently I was just out and there were crickets like at the same tempo as something like Guy's Eyes, or I can't recall like specifically what song, but I just like heard that like tss, 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 tss in the background, and my brain goes, hey, is Geologist around anywhere? Because, you know. Speaking of sea creatures, you once said that your favorite Animal Collective album was Dance Manatee. Do you still feel that way?
I don't know. I don't know if I think about things like that so much anymore. I think I liked Dance Manatee at the time because it just felt so unlike anything, and like that was really the like Spirit was before that, but Spirit felt a little bit more like the end of high school stuff, or like the end of like the teenage years. There was just something about it that didn't like feel like New York to us, you know. It felt like Dave primarily did it back at his parents' house in Baltimore, and I know it was going back there during the summers. But Dance Manatee was like, the thing about Dance Manatee was it was when like we were already doing that when Spirit came out. So for people in New York to hear Spirit and get like interested, and it was just like I don't know, there was like an excitement to it, and just feeling like can we do this, and getting a practice space with Black Dice and going on tour. It was just the beginning, you know, of so much, and I definitely don't think that record sounds as good as it should. Like we did like all the live tracking on tape, the same machine in the same place that Dave did Spirit, actually. Like we came back from New York and did it, and it sounded so good. Just like some of my electronics and synthesizers, no on drums, Dave on guitar, no vocals even. But it took up all the tracks on the thing, so we were like, all right, well, we gotta, like that first playback. So that's like, those things were in my head. Like we did all the songs, then we just like put the reel back on and we like played them back and got like the drums balanced and whatever. And we were like, oh my God, this sounds so good. But we're gonna have to condense this now to 2 tracks onto like a digital 8-track that we had, and then we'll do the overdubs on those. And we didn't know what we were doing when we did that transfer. We didn't know anything about compression or limiting.
Well, I know that was, you recalled way back when about how there were like certain frequencies that you were able to achieve on Spirit that didn't necessarily come through on Dance because of the technical limitations.
Yeah, like on Spirit it was all done on tape, which is very forgiving. And this, like going between the analog and the digital, there were like certain precautions that we learned many years later that we should have done. But it's cool. I mean, Dave and I hadn't listened in a long time. We had to relearn. We haven't played All Good Country since the fall of 2000.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
So
that one
we had to
seemed to
relearn
come out
it.
of nowhere.
Yeah, we were trying to think of something. We knew we were going to do Man of Oil. We always do it. And we were like, we should do more than one. And he was like, when was the last time we thought about playing this? Like, this one could be good. And you can play them both in the same key with the hurdy-gurdy, even though one's in a major and one's in a minor. You can, like, the hurdy-gurdy is only like a fifth. Like, it has like the root note and then the fifth. And then you can change, like, go from major to minor if you want. So it was like, oh, they're both we can make them in the same key. And I don't know, we're just.
So we talked about, I guess, well, okay, let's do this one, because we just talked about the hurdy-gurdy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You played that on stage, and you've done the gong during Defeat. Is there anything on Isn't It Now that is similar to that? Because I know that the personnel list came out recently, and I don't think there was anything credited to you other than, like, synthesizers, hurdy-gurdy, and, you know, your usual Geologist isms.
Mm-hmm.
But is there anything that you, like, hid in the mix that you think
I
most
play the
people
acoustic
won't notice?
guitars on See a Light, but or whatever, the second
Genie's Open.
Yeah.
What's your take on the like?
But
do you get too attached to the demo titles before the group decides on a final title? Like, do you
sometimes? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like? Because I know some people like there's the fan names, of course, like turn into something country fuck or
Yeah.
summertime clothes, bear hug, that kind of stuff.
So, well, Genie's Open was like Noah doesn't often name his demos, or he didn't for this time anyway.
Like Car Keys was 24.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he just they just have numbers. That hasn't been the case for every record. Like for Painting With, they all had titles, and for Merriweather, they all had titles. So, but this one, it was just like a lot of times he didn't even have lyrics, so it was just like just the numbers. So that was like PB30, like Panda Bear 30 is the beginning of that, and then they had Sea of Light that we knew we were gonna do, and I don't remember when we fused them. It was Dave's idea actually. Dave was like, we really like this thing of Noah's, but it was kind of on the short side, it just like repeats that thing a couple times, and we really liked it, but we weren't sure like how to start it, how to end it. And I think it was Dave that said like, well, I'm not sure how we should start Sea of Light. And I imagine something like that one, starting Sea of Light. Why don't we try and like, it's just like in the practice phase, let's try and play this, and let's try and like improvise our way into Sea of Light. So it was always like PB30, Sea of Light kind of thing. And then I don't remember when that title.
Right. So we talked a bit earlier about like songs going in specific orders on the track list, what would defeat Up for Contention. I'm wondering how much of that, the final order of something, is like y'all take into consideration the streaming side of it versus like the vinyl, the practically having to press it to a physical record, like the space of how each song can fit on a side. How much of like all of that goes into how you consider it, or is it just this is the order we like, now how do we make it work with the limitations?
Yeah, it's always the latter in the band. Definitely other people around us like bring up streaming. Like we recorded Gemini and Broke Zodiac for Time Skiffs, and we just didn't think that they sounded as good as they could. And we took them off. But Domino had heard, like normally we don't really like send them the record till it's all finished, but the nature of COVID and everything, we sent it to them. We said like we did like 11 songs, like this is what we're sending to mastering, and then in between that and actually going to mastering, we took them off, and we just said like, I think it was like we were gonna go back and like try and tweak the mixes again, and we just decided like, you know what, like they just don't sound as good as when we're in the room playing together, so let's try it again on the next record.
Well, I think it's interesting how there's like a bit of a yin and a yang between Time Skiffs and Isn't It Now, with like some of the more like stuff like Royal and Desire or Passerby being on Time Skiffs, when your brain might think, oh, it goes with the other batch of songs.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, there is a little bit of a Venn diagram to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I remember Domino was like, can you please put those songs back on Time Skiffs? And we were like, why? They're not their best versions. Like
they're like, because Broke Zodiac is a single, damn it.
Yeah, especially the old Broke Zodiac was fast. And they were like, Gemini can, they thought like Gemini could be like a great like summer playlist. Like they thought in terms of like what can get playlisted,
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't care.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, I think maybe the only time I heard y'all say anything about that was Painting With, and Dave saying something about how subconsciously there was maybe an attempt to sort of streamline the lengths and the poppiness of it, for not that you guys make it for the appeal of the mainstream, but like it would be a nice side effect if that
yeah,
worked
if he said that, I'm sure that was more of a side effect thing.
Because
That was
Floridata
never,
is like a radio song, like
Yeah.
100%.
But the idea for that had been floating around for so long. Not Floridata specifically, but
Right.
that idea, like Dave and Noah, especially like being in the van on tour, like, and you sometimes don't want to listen to these like long psych rock epics. Someone's just like, I've got to stay awake. Like, just put on the Beatles, put on the Strokes, put on the Ramones. Like, just like put on like the Boston record. Like just like put on something with these like pure, concise pop songs. And like in those moments, it would lead to discussion like, well, neither of us write songs like this ever, and like it seems like a challenge, and I wonder if we could do it. But that conversation went on, like it started long before Painting With, and before streaming.
So we were talking about Let the Right One In, and actually that is sort of related to a question I have for this, because our podcast is a musician and a filmmaker. We do an album and we do a movie, and we want to spotlight Isn't It Now, because of course you've granted me the time and I'm fortunate enough to speak to you today. But we also want to talk about the album in depth. I'm wondering, is there a movie that you can think of that would pair well with the aesthetic of the album or the sounds on it that comes to mind? Or like, because for example, like you guys were, when you were recording Painting With, you had the lore of it is, or of course the soundbite that's in every interview is we had reels of old dinosaur movies playing on a projector and the kiddie pool and all that stuff. So I'm wondering, is there like anything sort of in that vein
That's true
that comes to
about
mind
all
for
that
this?
stuff. I don't know. I think, there's a streaming service called Shudder, and we actually, I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I haven't heard anything back. But, when people are trying to think of like ideas to promote the record, Dave and I were like, get us the guest curator spot on Shudder, and we'll think about
That would be perfect
We'll
for
think
y'all.
about this precise question that you're asking
Okay.
us. But like we haven't been asked yet, and we haven't done the work to really like think about it. But I think you could probably go with some full car stuff, like
Like
Blood
Mandy?
on.
Like Mandy? The
No.
Nick Cage movie?
No,
Or-
I'd say like Blood on Satan's Claw or Valerie in Her Week of Wonders or V. I don't know if you've ever seen. These are all like older movies, like 60s and 70s movies. But Shudder does have like a full car collection already on there.
Well,
So
when you
we might
said
just
Shudder,
be-
my brain thought Mandy because that's actually a Shudder original. I think they.
I know. I keep
funded a
meaning to
big
watch
part
it
of
actually.
It's really
but,
good. It's one of Nick Cage's best performances. Although I think Pig surpasses it,
Mm.
but it's a lot. He's a lot more low key in Pig.
We
so.
did a pitch to score a new Nick Cage project. I thought I really wanted it to, but I can't talk much more about it because I think I signed
That's
an
fair.
NDA. But
Well, what we can talk about is the Red Dead Redemption game, Mountain Game, the song. I think when that comes out 6 years after the game and y'all say, oh, we made this for Red Dead Redemption, but it got rejected, so here it is now. I'm curious how that even came about. I don't know if we ever got the inside baseball story on that.
Well, it came about in the same month my son, first child, was born. So my brain is it's not gonna recall
That
a
took
ton.
precedence. I got you.
I might say a lore that might not be true because
Okay.
again I might be like conflating things. But somebody had like proposed a collaboration. I can't remember with who. But,
Do you think it was, can you speculate that maybe it had something to do with the popularity of Merriweather Post Pavilion and how y'all were like the indie darlings of the scene at that minute?
maybe? But I don't think that was the side of us they wanted. I think it was more like people, and like somebody, like it was a music supervisor in New York, and he knew, I think, more like sung tongs, and like he knew we were capable of that. And
Well, if there was one album I would put over Red Dead Redemption, it would be like Campfire Songs. Is like
that,
quite
or I
literally
think Josh
that
and I kind of eventually did it with Crestone. Like Crestone to me is like my spiritual West, like especially the songs I did on Crestone, because like we kind of did it a little bit split. Like we play on each other's tracks here and there, but some of it's like that's Josh, and some of that's Brian.
But you're getting that similar like visual inspiration from the landscapes of
Yeah, I
Colorado
used to
and
live in
Texas and
I used
all
to live
that.
in Arizona for a long time, so
Right.
like wanting to do like I always wanted to do like a solo record that would be sort of like a weird instrumental cosmic country thing, but KLF did it with Chill Out really well, and there's a gazillion ambient pedal steel players out there right now. But anyway, that's I think what they wanted from us, Red Dead Redemption. But Dave had been asked to do another project, and again, since like Noah and I both had children that summer, so like Dave was like, well, I'll do this thing solo, and he wrote Mountain Game for that, and then that fell apart. Whatever session he was supposed to do, Red Dead Redemption called, and Dave said, like, I just wrote a song that I have nothing to do with. Like, do you guys want to come up? And so I went up to New York for just a day, worked it on with him. Noah sent his parts remotely. We sent it in to them, and they were like, this really wasn't what we were looking for, guys. Sorry. And that was that.
Y'all scored movies like Crestone and The Inspection and the upcoming maybe untitled documentary.
I think it's just called Jetty.
It should. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that was there any like joke in the group chat about how Noah has that song Last Night at the Jetty and that's the project y'all are working on now?
No,
or-
but I mean the director actually has worked with Noah before. He did the video for, I think, for Surfer's Hymn, and he did some stuff like, if you've seen like there's footage of Noah in Lisbon around when the Grim Reaper record came out. It's like almost like an electronic press kit, like an EPK kind of a thing.
Yeah.
It's
Is that
guy.
like him and Pete in that video?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's that guy, and
Oh, that's cool.
Sam Fleischner is his name.
So
yeah.
Odd Sack was like a 4 or 5 year process, right? Of like that give and take with y'all and Danny Perez. Like,
But yeah, 3.5, 4 years. Yeah.
And y'all have collaborated with him on video since then. I'm curious if y'all have the like urge to do another Oddsack type project, or is it just because y'all have gotten to a certain age and you're so spread out that it's not as practical to?
Yeah, it wasn't practical back then.
Oh, okay.
But I love doing it, and yeah, working on something like that, which we called it a visual album at the time, and there's been some back and forth about whether we should just release the audio on Spotify. I definitely am in the camp of like I'd prefer not to. Noah's I think on my side as well. The other two guys I think could go either way.
You
but
mean
like
as
Danny
far
was
as separating the songs?
yeah, because
on
Danny
the
was
thing?
just such a strong part of it. Like he was in the studio with us, and he took the vocal booth and turned it into like an editing suite for himself, and we literally were just like passing files between the two rooms, and he would he would hand us some footage, we would score to it, we would give it back to him, and then he might change something, or we would say to him like, hey, so like compositionally it made sense for this beat to land here, but like you have a cut that's just like a couple seconds later, can you change that cut? And he would do it. Or sometimes he would make a cut that he's like, I just can't look at this any longer, or like if this fades into this thing it looks really great, but like musically it doesn't line up, and then we would go back and change what we did. And it's almost like he's like a fifth band member. So to me it's like putting up the songs removes a band member's contribution from a song, so that's why I'm not in favor of it. But doing that kind of stuff, like that process that I just mentioned, which is why I'm not into the separation, but doing it like was a lot of work and a lot of time. So
Yeah.
very painstaking.
No, making
but,
a movie, I can tell you from experience, is a pain in the ass no matter what size or shape or scale, you know. Especially when it's something like that where there is like a blending of the two mediums.
Yeah.
So this is a question of, I asked on the Discord server if anyone had any questions for you. So someone asked, well, do you have the earliest memory of like the first time you sampled something for like just messing around, experimenting, or like a sound collage type of thing? Like, is there a specific memory that comes to mind of like the first time you sort of played around with that?
It was like in 11th grade, I want to say. So yeah, when I was like 16, Dave and I were already getting into like horror movie soundtracks and curious about it. And I couldn't tell you like what it was, but just like making our own like sounds around the house, and sometimes putting them on a dictaphone and then like playing the tape back and messing with the speed. So we had again, like going back to the early roots of Animal Collective, like we had this band Automine that was like the two of us and some other friends. Eventually Josh joined that, and then he introduced us to Noah. But like Dave and I had a few side bands too. One was called Wendy Darling. We did another one. It was called Dark Ages, which is when we did what I'm talking about. But in Wendy Darling, we did too. Again, we were like 17, I think. We're just recording things off TVs, recording things off records, or like spinning a record backwards, and like recording that onto cassettes and stuff.
Cool. All right. So I really don't have much else that I wanted to ask. I guess we can talk about the Tucson tracks, since that's just out now. So where did the songs on it come from? Is it just like...
It was just a clearing thing. Like I did both of those songs in my live set a long time ago. And I usually find my solo music more fun to play than ever to listen back to. I don't know if other people feel the same way. I hope they don't. But so like I rarely have like an interest in tracking it, like I like to put out live recordings. But for those two, it was like early in the pandemic, and I thought about putting out a 12-inch just to get me through, and like they weren't on they weren't in the first tape I did. They were not like part of the performance that was recorded that night. I may not have even written them by that point. So like I still had the samples and the loops and everything for them, and I was playing them live on the tour I did with Noah, tour I did with Dave, and like some other shows like with Gang Gang Dance, and there was no like record of them. And again, Dave and our friend have started this cassette label, Dosed, and he really liked those songs when I used to play them, and he's a close friend of mine. He's always asking me like, is there a project we can work on together? And I was like, well, during the pandemic, we mixed those two tracks together, and then I just didn't put out the 12-inch. It just became, I was like, why am I trying to put out vinyl during this time? It's like life is already too crazy. So I sat on them. I didn't do anything with them, and I was just kind of content with never putting them out. But once Dave and our friend Adam started this cassette label, I was like, hey, well, we already worked on like a single together 4 years ago. We never did anything with it. Like, if you guys want to put it out, you can do it. And also, I'm going to play some shows. So if you get it done by the shows, I'll bring them on the road. But yeah, so 2 Sun tracks I did 2019, and the other one, Super, was 2018. I'm probably just going to give all the money away to charity or something. But it was just about getting something out of my head, off my hard drive, and out into the world, you know?
Right. Well, I think that part of the allure of your live stuff is that we don't know if like you're performing, it might be the only time it's ever seen or witnessed in public.
Yeah.
Like, I saw you at, was it Gassa Gassa in New Orleans in 2019?
Yeah. Tucson Tracks would have been the first song I played there.
Okay, well, now I can go back in my recording and amend that, because because if it's something that we don't know from Live in the Land of the Sky, or something that you explicitly say, this is the name of this, it's just going to have new song in brackets, you know?
I have a lot. I'm trying to change that. Again, it's a thing about, like, I have a lot of fun playing stuff more than I like listening back. But I made a record last year with a friend, or for a friend, for his birthday, and I think that's coming out next year. We just have to decide on titles.
I was going to ask about that record, because it was like he played guitar samples and then you sort of like took them and manipulated them. Is this the same project you're talking about?
Yeah, have I talked about this already?
I think you talked about it in an interview, but we just wanted to, we're really just curious about if there were any updates on that.
So it's more like he made Instagram videos, and I thought they were really beautiful.
Kind of like Josh on his piano, sort of working
that
out
kind
songs.
of stuff. Totally.
Gotcha.
And the entire record is sourced from those Instagrams. Like, I just like took them and I chopped them up and I put them into my modular and made new compositions. So, like, you generally can't like recognize anything from the original videos or whatever. And I just gave it to him as a birthday present, because he had wanted to finish a record by his 40th birthday and he hadn't. And so I made this as like a birthday present, because I was really inspired to do it. So I worked on it, and it came together fairly quickly just for me in my studio. And I gave it to him and was like, you did make a record, because literally every sound on here is you. Like, if you took away everything that's you, it would just be complete silence. So, like, congratulations, happy birthday, you made a record. Don't be bummed. But musically, it's all done. It's just, and it just needs to titles and artwork. You know, again, some of the other projects like kind of come and go. And then I just wrote a whole new set, which actually, and I really like what I'm doing now, so I might try and actually record this stuff, but we'll see. I mean, you can let me know at the end of the night if it was more fun to listen to than for me to play.
Well, I'm already gonna record it anyway.
Yeah,
so.
I have a blast playing it, so so I hope it's fun to listen to.
Yeah, for sure. I think as far as like maybe the fun of it comes out of trying to dissect the different like noises that you're able to accomplish at the different, because there is so much like free form like structure to the songs that sometimes you have to like, unless it's like a hard cut into the next thing, you really do sort of have to gauge like, where am I going to split these two tracks? Because, you know, it's in your oeuvre to constantly do the blending of the two, the end of one song and the start of the next, like with Animal Collective or any other project. So.
And this stuff's no different. Actually, one of those songs from that Instagram record, I'm going to play tonight. And like, I have added stuff to it since then, but the version on the record won't have my added stuff to it. But
interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll be a nice treat for those that were able to make it out to the tour, I guess. Yeah. So the only other thing I wanted to ask is, you still do the O'Brien system monthly? Mm-hmm. Are there any plans to? Because 2019 was a pretty prolific year for that show, I think, in terms of the amount of like unheard Animal Collective goodies you were able to sort of show off. Either throughout the show, like Crispy Pops, or like the Penny Dreadfuls demo at the end of a show. Do you have any plans to show anything from this era, or maybe like from 2018 to now, as like sort of like a way to cap off the era?
I did one already, but Domino asked me not to list it in the track listing, because I didn't realize it at the time.
Oh, so this is you saying, "Hey, fans, go look for the Easter egg." Go.
There have been some other Easter eggs. Like I ended one show after we put like Prester John into Shazam. Like, it was Shazamable, and I put like, or like maybe some of the other songs from Time Skiffs. I put like intros and outros in the O'Brien system that are like on that record.
Oh, interesting.
And we were wondering, like, will somebody like this enough, like, that they will Shazam it and see that it's like part of the new Animal Collective record? Nobody did.
I think it's because it's because I think you play so many different types of music that
Yeah.
People might assume that it's just part of the thing that's on the track list. Like,
Yeah.
oh, the song's going here now.
Yeah.
Like whenever you debuted that Lifted collab that Noah did, and it was just like a bunch of question marks.
I think Jeremy Hyman guested for that episode.
That's
he
right.
put it there, yeah. But I did the challenge, which was like the B-side to the Defeat 12-inch.
Oh, yeah.
Not the white label, but like the actual 12-inch.
Right.
I made that in the spring, and I put that on an O'Brien system like at the end. And then Domino was like, hey, the Defeat 12-inch was like a limited thing. And like, again, because they were thinking about people that spent their money on it, they were like, we feel bad for the people that spent their money to get this exclusive track on the B-side. And like, we weren't going to release it digitally, but you kind of just made a digital version because you can always go back and listen to the streams of NTS.
Right. So I won't say that their player is necessarily the best for skipping around.
I agree. But they still felt like...
But hey, listen to the whole show. Yeah. Brian put a lot of work into it.
So Domino was like they wanted to be considerate of like the people that had bought the 12-inch. So they were like, yeah, it's cool if like NTS like still archives the show. Like we don't want them to delete it off their server, but just make it harder to find. So like don't like list it in the playlist that you did it.
Well, especially because you used to do the monthly. I don't know if you still do it. You still do the Instagram post on the main.
Yeah, I just don't go on Instagram so much anymore. So and I didn't like having to go on. I do go on for the stories. Like NTS asked me to like post like if I have a show that day, but I'd rather just do like a roundup at the end of the year. Although Instagram doesn't let you do like more than 10 photos, so I can't do the.
You can't do 12.
I can't do 12.
Yeah.
But and usually a year is 13 playlists. So I haven't figured out what I'll do at the end of this one, but yeah. Right. So like the challenge was in there. I don't know if people have heard that, right? Like that's out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you know that the nature of a band like Animal Collective is that stuff will inevitably leak. As soon as people get their hands on it, it spreads like wildfire. Isn't it now? Notwithstanding the fact that it leaked a month ago, and so like the diehard fans, and I'm assuming a majority of them paid for a physical record, have already heard it. I'll admit I'm guilty of it myself because I knew I already purchased the vinyl, so I didn't feel bad.
No, I don't think we care anymore.
Yeah, but I really don't know where I was going with this actually.
No, it's okay.
Well, that's a great way to end the interview.
Yeah,
just trailing off into nonsense. Brian, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. I didn't expect to take nearly this much time, but I do appreciate that we were able to go a lot more in depth than I planned. So
cool. Well, yeah, thank you for your interest and thanks for wanting to talk. I appreciate it.
All right, so that concludes part 1 of this 2-part interview episode, and here we are, part 2. Josh Dibb, aka Deakin. So, yeah, isn't it now? It's out. It's now. So
it's now. Yeah.
Songs that appear on Isn't It Now have been around for a pretty long time. Since 2018, they debuted at the Music Box show in New Orleans. Seeing as
Soul Capture is newer than that. Soul Capture didn't really. I don't know when Dave first did his own version of it, but the first time he shared it with us to collaborate was like I think right after we finished tracking time skips, so that would have been like January-ish of 2021, maybe this over the holidays of 2020 of like 2020 2021 is when he first shared us a demo for Soul Capture, and I was the only one that actually did any work on it around then. Like I wrote all the harmonies that I sang on the record, and then like added some synth stuff, which that version kind of disappeared, but the harmony stuck. But we didn't actually work on that song as a group until August of 2021. So that was actually only a few months before we ended up going into the studio. But I think All the Clubs Are Broken is a song also that he'd introduced quite a while ago, but we just never, I think we played it in some form in 2019 when we were all together, but I don't think it ever really caught. Like it just didn't seem to ever, like nothing happened with it. So that was very much like kind of like a towards the end kind of like pulled that one together. But yeah, I guess everything else was I realized I'm going to cut you off. The songs that debuted at in New Orleans were Magicians, Royal, which I know is on Time Skips, Defeat, a part of Prester John, um, and then everything else that's on Time Skiffs didn't really appear until the summer of 2019. Like the Noah's two songs, Gemini and Broke Zodiac. And I guess, yeah, Genie's Open is another one that's like, Noah had, obviously Genie's Open existed prior to all of this. When Dave and Noah did the Sung Tongs touring, they were playing it, a version then, but then Noah's addition to it didn't come about until we started working on it in 2019. So anyway, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like, given that Animal Collective is known for being such a like transformative band and is constantly, changing up the styles, changing up the instrumentation, like, do you feel some sense of relief now that Time Skiffs and Isn't It Now are finally out there in the world?
Yeah, I do. I mean, with the caveat of it though it's a decision that we kind of all came to as a group, I wish we had a chance to tour sort of post album coming out. Not so, I mean, I think we are righteously in a whatever you'd call it, like kind of a hiatus period. Like I think we have been with this music for a long time, but I wish that if the pandemic hadn't been what it had been, I think we would have put some version of all these songs out in the world. And there's a difference between what it feels like, I think, to play songs before people have heard them on record and what it feels like to play them after they've heard them on record. And I like both for different reasons. And it feels a little sad to me that we never are, not never, but for the time being, are not going to have that kind of like, all right, you finally heard the record, like here's that song, so that part's a little tough, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, it's definitely a relief. I mean, it's we put a lot of ourselves into all this music and definitely did not expect it to sort of come out in the way that it did, and the impact of the pandemic and how that impacted the release and the amount of time that we were working on stuff and when we got to record things and all of that, which just is what it is. At this point, I don't really have like I wish things had been different kind of like narrative about it. It worked out the way it worked out, and there's probably a lot of really beautiful things that are a result of that. So yeah, I am relieved. Yes,
For sure.
I could have just said
that. The like, in an alternate timeline where COVID never happened, was the idea leading up with this batch of songs to just make one album, or was there ever like two albums?
We never got to the point where we were really discussing like what would be on what type of release. So I can't really, there was no like discussion that I'm remember, at least. I think my guess is it probably would have been something more like one significant album and either, one or two more EPs or collections of singles or yeah, I feel like we would have found some other way to break it up. That would have probably fit more into just there being like kind of one primary album to focus on during this period of time. And so the fact that it got split up into two was kind of, yeah, probably not going to happen, but it's really hard to say. We're definitely not like, even the length of Time Skiffs or of Isn't It Now was like a fairly large point of contention within the band. There's definitely like a pretty strong movement against sort of records that are too long. So the idea that we would have put out some sort of like, quadruple LP kind of monstrosity, I think is very unlikely. I don't think that would have really ever flown with the group. I think it probably would have been more of like a pretty classic sort of thing. What some sort of primary album with a 9 to 10 track listing, and then some amount of kind of EPs and singles that would have backed it all up. So, but who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. And I know that you guys, we were talking to Brian, and he was mentioning that there's a couple songs, the Noah led songs, Gemini and Broke Zodiac, were actually recorded remotely for Skiffs originally.
Yep.
But then they weren't used because you guys preferred to be all in the same room for those songs.
They just, I mean, I guess they just didn't feel good. I mean, I think we, everything else, I think we felt like got to a place that we all felt satisfied with, and those just never quite clicked. There was just something missing, and I don't think we were able to identify totally what it was. They just didn't feel quite right. So yeah, we just ultimately ended up letting them go. Which I think at the time, even the label was, because the label had heard, I think they'd heard them, and they were like, come on, like we really, like we really want this one on the record. I think both, but for some reason I remember them being particularly psyched on Gemini, and we just were kind of held our ground and sort of knew that there was a better version of it out there, and we just hadn't gotten it. So
Nice. So I suppose that means that like nobody's really going to hear these versions, the time skiffs versions of those two
Hmm.
songs, or is that
I mean,
some
not
little?
not for now. I mean, they exist. Who's to say? I mean, I feel like with that kind of stuff, it's you know, periodically there's a reissue release or some sort of whatever that we're like, oh, you know what, we actually have this thing and no one's listened to it in 5 years or 10 years, and then somebody does and like, it actually sounds pretty cool. So you never know. But at the moment, there's been no talk of it. So I haven't even listened to those versions since we kind of decided to shelve them. So I don't even know what they sound like.
Fair enough.
Um,
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like, because you guys as a band, you must be sitting on a lot of stuff that like widely isn't heard by people because you make so much stuff. You're each all so prolific, and as a band, you're prolific. I was talking to
mhm.
Danny Perez a couple years ago for the 10-year anniversary of Oddsac, and he mentioned that there's like a ton of alternate versions of the visuals and the audio because you guys kept sending it back and forth. And I was like,
Yep.
whoa, that's kind of like mind blowing to think about as a fan of the music, because I'd be interested in hearing like every single different iteration of that and seeing every
Uh-huh.
different iteration of that. Do you think that there's anything like I feel like when I talked to Danny about that, he maybe didn't even necessarily think of releasing it because he was like, yeah, maybe like, if there was like a re-release or something, you could add that as like a bonus feature or something.
Yeah, who can say? I mean, I on some level, my memory of like what all those things would be like would be more akin to, when we go in the studio, we generally do anywhere from 2 to 20 plus takes of any given song, and all of them generally have something in them that's cool, but there's some point at which you're just like, that's the one that has all the stuff we need. And I know that like for anybody who's a hardcore fan of any band or whatever, there's some satisfaction in being able to hear like outtakes and stuff, and those things can be cool. But I don't know, I think we kind of tend to shy away from that level of like overexposure of kind of the process or something. So
Mhm.
but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I honestly, with the odd stuff, I would have to like, I'd have to, it's sort of, I don't, I mean, that definitely was very much a process. It was built like kind of baked into the whole idea of it that we would do a lot of that sort of back and forth, but I don't necessarily remember at any one point anything that was, that I'm like, oh man, yeah, there was that one version of, the like whatever jam that like, that like, yeah, it was so perfect. And then we altered it and like, it's still good, but like, I think there was something we lost. I don't have any memory of anything like that, but maybe somebody else does. But yeah, we would just have to go through stuff. And yeah, I mean, Oddsock is such a strange release. I feel like in our catalog, I feel like for the most part, it gets looked over. It doesn't really get seen as an album, and I think to us, it was absolutely an album. And I feel like for that reason, it just, yeah. I mean, at the time, I'm sure as you know, like it didn't get like reviewed in the same way, and it wasn't like in shops, like people, record stores wouldn't shelve it because it was a DVD, and so I think
Yeah.
it felt a little bit. We've always been kind of, I think, frustrated and felt like that was in a weird way. I still stand by the decision we made at the time to like keep it to a DVD only release, but in doing that, we clearly like kind of ended up having it uh kind of,
I guess kind of
yeah,
like
put in
limits
put
the accessibility a little bit there.
yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's in that, for I guess for that reason, there is part of me that always wants to find some way to kind of bring attention to it again, but I don't know, it's hard to say. I feel like at this point we have the benefit, and which is awesome, but also the kind of the difficulty of being a band that not only has, I mean, just forget about the past. It's just even in the current time. I mean, this last year and a half or so has been crazy between, time skiffs, isn't it now? Bridge to Quiet, Reset and Dub, Spirit being reissued, Sevens coming out. It's just, it's sort of,
It's a lot.
it's a lot. And I think, everything from like from our label's perspective of trying to kind of, find ways to produce and put attention behind all those things. And we've been coming up against the reality of even the press at large, which I think is something that we've never really had to contend with this before. But there's sort of like a oversaturation of just like, we think, it's like, I think of Noah putting something out as being very different from the band putting something out, but I don't know if Pitchfork or Exclaim or Stereogum feels that way for them. It's just like, oh, another Animal Collective thing, another Animal Collective thing, another Animal Collective thing. So I think when you think about that, and we are still a very like active, forward thinking group, I think sometimes the kind of like reissue look back stuff feels a little bit like, all right, I mean, we want to, but that's going to take up time. And what if we do that, then that means we can't do this, and let's just keep going. So, but I'm sure someday,
That'd
or
be cool. I mean, it's cool that because you guys, I know you played like screens and I think another odd sack cut on the tour
yeah,
last year.
working,
Yeah.
which was like the kind of there's two jams that are together. One of them is like where Noah is walking across the boulders with like the white wig on,
Yeah.
which is a song Dave wrote, and then that kind of transitions into Tantrum Barb, which is a song Noah wrote. So they're kind of the same. They're kind of on the movie feel like they're sort of linked together, but yeah, we played that first part, which is called Working.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really cool like that that came like I feel like as a fan and many Animal Collective fans are like, I wonder if they'll ever play odd sack material. So it was mind blowing to see that. But yeah, I think if any sort of like reissue of it comes out and there's bonus stuff, or even if there is like a digital version, I think so that more people can hear it, I think people would be blown away, because I do consider it as an album. I listen to it all the time because someone ripped it to YouTube or whatever, and that's the kind of the easiest way to go about it without a DVD player. But yeah, I mean, like, speaking of the label, I was thinking about like album rollouts, and like you guys have had some really fun and engaging stuff with the last two records. Like, Isn't It Now, the white label Defeat vinyls got sent out. There's those cryptic postcards that just said "Isn't It Now," billboards and stuff like that. And then for time skiffs, you guys had like kind of like puzzle pieces scattered throughout the internet for people to find the back cover. Is this is that something that the record label is are they the ones kind of behind the rollout, or are you guys like actively kind of coming up with ideas?
The ideas almost always come from us. I mean, I think there's generally some sort of encouragement from the label and from management to kind of like do something. So I think they kind of like the idea of sort of that type of process. And I honestly don't remember. I'm horrible with kind of like this type of detail. It's very possible that in some of these cases it might have been started from like the label being like, hey, we had an idea for rollout. Like, what if you guys did X? And then I would say, if that was how it happens, we were like, no, that doesn't sound very cool. But since you say that, what if, So yeah, all the ideas are always some things that kind of come out of our brains. I would say probably 9 times out of 10 out of Dave's. I feel like he's responsible for a lot of that kind of stuff. But I don't totally remember. The 12-inch idea actually might have been something that sort of came from the label first, but I think that we altered. I don't remember what their original like pitch for it was, but I think we had like a very different idea of how to do it. And there's always a lot of back and forth. I mean, there's things that like we want to do that kind of end up not happening, and it's but yeah, we sort of just always find some sort of
super cool.
I don't know. Yeah,
super cool. Yeah, like I mean, the day that the Defeat white label showed up on my door was mind-blowing, because I mean, that was one of the songs that fans have probably been bugging all of you guys at every show. When's it going to come out? When's it going to come out? This magnum opus of a song, and then lo and behold, there it is on the doorstep. It was a surreal moment, and to hear it in it's so beautifully put together and so beautifully recorded, and it just sounds so good. It was something else. So that was great. Whoever's idea that was, I tip my cap to you guys and the record label if it was a collaborative thing. A lot of fans obviously super big about that. You guys, I mean, do you guys ever like check in on like some of those super fan forums and stuff like Collected Animals or like the Discord? And because I feel like those are the guys that are mainly putting these puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, I feel like I shouldn't totally out my I think I do, but I only do it kind of once. Like I did it once I knew the record had leaked, because I just kind of am curious like how people are feeling about it. I don't like keep up with it year round.
Yeah.
So when like stuff like that was going on, like the puzzle pieces or the 12 inches, I didn't check at all. But usually around any sort of release, I kind of just for better or for worse, I can't, it's hard for me to resist. So I'm kind of always just kind of curious, like how people are reacting. Yeah. So yeah, I know that stuff, but like, it's like, yeah, it kind of like, I got wind of the leak happening and that things were starting to blow up, and I kind of started reading that stuff around then, and I would say like in the last week or so, like since most of like the reviews have come out, and I've kind of, it's like tapering off, like my interest in kind of checking things out is like lessened. And I also, you know, part of that is like I hesitate to even tell you that because some people will hear it, and I sort of realized at a certain point that it kind of is a private space, you know, and I sort of feel like there's like, I don't know, I feel like it's cool that people have a place that they can go talk about stuff that I'm aware that maybe if they thought that like one of us was looking, they might like feel weird about saying things. So I don't know. It feels like I'm like, I don't know, peeking into like a teenager's bedroom or something and like let them have their space. But
Yeah, I think people would probably think it's cool because I think, you know, for the most part, you know, forums like Collected Animals, I think it's 99% praise for whatever you guys do. So
yeah, and I also I've become, I mean, part of my thing with that stuff too, and I think this kind of happened around Sleep Cycle. I realized that like I saw the most like insanely absurd complimentary stuff about what I do, and I also saw the most insanely like unnecessarily shitty stuff about what I do, and both spectrums and everything between that. I just sort of, it's sort of what's the word? Not inoculated me to it. Like I can't say like I'm for sure. Like if I see something like really shitty, it can like kind of sting a little bit, or if someone's really bummed. But for the most part, I just sort of like, yeah, I sort of like, I don't like, I've even gone on 4chan to check stuff out and been like, oh shit, like people are like hateful, like this is dark, you know. But then
yeah,
somebody's like really stoked, and you're like, all right, I just find it kind of interesting at this point more than I find it like good or bad. Even the stuff that's really glowing, you know. I mean, it's you know, people, you know, and if you're one of them, no offense, but like being like they're the Beatles or whatever, and you're just like, thanks, but you know, we're not the Beatles, but thank you, you know, like cool, like it's nice to see that stuff, and I think like realizing that level of enthusiasm is there is cool. The thing I actually find the most interesting, especially I've been noticing on this cycle for some reason, especially is you know, there's this like larger narrative about us kind of like we had the golden years, and then it's like the jury is out, and depending on who you talk to, like one record is the best thing we've ever done, and they don't even like the stuff prior to 2011, and other people, it's just like and I've realized that we've almost by design kind of curated a fan base that doesn't agree with itself. And I feel like there's almost not a single release that we've put out that there's not a handful of people that like champion it as the best thing we've done. I mean, I kind of without fail, it's like there are people, you know, like which I think, and yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think it's like I wonder like if other bands have that kind of level of like, I don't know, discrepancy sort of, or like or like everybody loves us, but for different reasons. For some people it's because of Noah, for some people it's because of Dave, it's starting to be because some people because of me, for some people it's because we make things like Tangerine Reef, and for some people it's because we make things like Painting With. And you know, it's like you know, there's the people that are like, oh, isn't it now, it's so like organic, and I love how like tight the like rhythm section is, and somebody else is like, where's all the bells and whistles, I miss all the synths, so like I wish it, like why isn't it like Painting With? And you're just like, man, you know. But then all the people that were like, Painting With is too busy, like why won't they go back to, and you're just like, oh, you can't, like everyone has a different idea of like who we are, which is pretty wild. It's cool. I kind of dig it.
it is cool. Yeah, for sure. I think, I mean, like you guys have, you know, just done so much. I think you guys have your fingers in like quite a lot of pies. So I think that by doing that, you are going to get that kind of reaction from people that almost feels like contradictory at times, where it's like, you know, because for me at least as a fan, like I love how everything sounds kind of different but has this kind of spirit to it that still feels like you guys. And you know, when you guys do your solo stuff too, I feel like there's always this kind of evolution, but the kind of like backbone of it is, you know, the soul of it, so to speak, is what you guys have always brought to your music. Whether it's, you know, whether it's stuff that, you know, Pitchfork fans are going to go like wild over, or if it's just some small group of like underground, like, you know, people that like noise music or something. It
Yep.
kind of satisfies a little bit of both, and there is overlap, and then there's other people that are just like, I only like this one sound or something. But It is fascinating, and I think it's really cool, like that you guys are just able to do so much. Because like Tangerine Reef is one of my favorite releases by you guys. And it
Thank you.
sounds nothing like Isn't It Now, but Isn't It Now is
Nope.
also one of my favorite releases by you guys. So
Nice.
it's hard to say. But yeah, like, speaking of the fan forums and everything, well, you mentioned like that you kind of checked it out when the leak happened. So like, maybe we'll talk about the leak a little bit, where it's 2023 and albums are still leaking ahead of their release date. How does this happen, and how does it make you guys feel when that happens?
I don't know how it happens. I don't think anybody is totally clear on how it happens. I mean, I have people who I trust who've even been like, I think the labels do it on purpose, and like they just don't tell you. I'm like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
okay, that'd be interesting. But I know that like I talked to the label, and they're like, they're not bummed, but they don't sound like it's what they wanted to happen. But they sort of accept it. I think so. I really I don't know how it happens. As far as I know, we do everything we can to um it's like we finish the record, and the only people that have it are like us, our manager, like in this case Heba, who mastered it, like the engineer. It's just like I don't know who, and then once we start sending it out in a significant form, we send it out watermarked, digitally watermarked. So I know there's ways around these things. So I don't know, I really don't know how it happens. And I don't know, I guess I think everybody feels a little bit differently about it. I would say as a whole, based on my sense from talking to the other dudes at this point, I think everyone's kind of just come to accept it, like kind of a long time ago. I mean, it's been happening. I mean, I think when we were in our 20s and it was happening around, albums like Strawberry Jam, it felt like, you know, this sucks. Like, God damn it, like we wanted to do this a certain way. And I think it kind of has just happened every time. It seems unavoidable. This one seemed a little early. My memory of maybe
It was like
like
a
time
month
skips, I
before
feel
the
like.
release, I think.
Yeah, and from reading some comments, I got the sense that some people had it even longer, and just it sort of was like there was a few people that had it maybe like going away. I don't know. Somebody at one point like made a comment about having like heard it for the first time on Father's Day or something, and I was like, Father's Day, Jesus Christ, like that was a long time ago. Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, I got the impression that maybe there was like one or two people that kind of had it for a minute, but weren't necessarily spreading it. And then a month out seems a little
Hmm.
significant. I don't remember what time skips was, but I thought it was only like a week before or something.
Yeah, I don't
But maybe it
even
was.
recall. I at least I wasn't aware of a time skips leak. I know, like, I'll tell you, Josh, that here in Toronto, the record store that's nearby my
Mhm,
place, they
mhm.
sold me a copy a week before it came out. I guess
Those.
they didn't know. But I mean, I had my own private leak, I suppose, at home with that record, so I got to enjoy that a week before anybody else did. But or I guess if it did leak somewhere else, then maybe other people did get to enjoy it before the actual drop. But yeah, it's fascinating. But yeah, also on the topic of the fans and these albums. So leading up to Isn't It Now, and you may or may not have seen this if you were on any of those groups, there was a lot of, like back and forth, like hypotheticals about what the track listing would be like on this thing. And I don't think out of all the predictions that were there, I don't think anybody predicted what the actual track list ended up being.
uh, uh,
Like, was it difficult to sequence this album?
a little bit. Yeah, I think it was a little bit. I don't know if we were all on the same page about it initially. I mean, there was even a point where it wasn't going to be all these songs. I think there was a point where it was only going to like Defeat was always going to be on the record. We always knew that. Everybody felt really clear about that. And I think because it's such a long song, there was a lot of discussion about just the length of albums in general. And I think there's definitely like a school of thought, which I totally understand. And I happen to not be on the side of, so maybe I was kind of the one that pushed it a bit, but of like albums really like the shorter, the better. Like they like keeping it, 50 minutes or less is like a great kind of marker. So at one point it was going to be like an album and an EP. And I know for my part, like and I'm not saying other people didn't feel the same way, but I know that I kind of voiced that I felt like it was kind of our EPs have always been something that have been really special. So it's not that I don't think that they have a really important place, but it actually felt more like an album and some stragglers when we did it that way. Like every way that it was like, okay, this is the record, and then these 3 songs are an EP. It felt really disjointed to me, and I just felt like, I don't know, we'd been through so. I mean, I don't know if my particular views on these things like are emotional and maybe nostalgic in a way that I don't know if everyone else in the band shares. So this is very much like my own perspective on these things. But I know for myself, I felt emotionally like the amount of work on every level that had gone into this whole era of making music, time skips included, and getting to the point where we were able to record in the studio with Russell, and the way that it felt being in the studio, like that 12 days in Brooklyn with him was, I think all 4 of us agree, was just like a really, really special time. Like things really clicked in this really incredible way. And it was absolutely, in my top 2 or 3 recording experiences. And I don't just mean like the recording part, I mean like the way that we all felt as people, and the way the music was feeling, and the way it was connecting. And it just felt really, I know for myself, I just felt a really strong feeling that what we had captured in that studio was meant to somehow be presented as like this moment, and I just felt like by breaking it up, to me it felt like doing a disservice to that. So I was a really big component of just of keeping all the songs together. And then I think at that point, there's certain people in the band that have really, really strong viewpoints on track listing. And I'm not totally one of them. Like I know I have my own instincts about stuff. So if I had been left to my own devices, I would have sequenced it a certain way. But I don't feel like I necessarily, I don't know how to put this. It's like not, there's so many things within the group that are like these beautiful ways that we find to have a group voice and to have like a group think. And part of that is to kind of know when to be like, I'm going to let you make this choice. So I'd been sort of the one that really pushed to be like, I'd really like all these songs to be on the record. Like it would really mean a lot to me, and I kind of was very passionate about why I thought that was a good idea. And then some other people started tossing around a couple different ideas, and I would be like, oh, that one seems cool, and what about switching that? And then someone would be like, nah, I don't like that. Like, okay, that's fine. Just kind of like let it be what it was going to be. So yeah, I don't know if there's like any sort of like deep. I don't have any like deep like story about like this is the reasoning behind it. Like I think it just kind of felt. There was talk about Defeat going at the end, and I think sometimes that felt like a good idea, and sometimes that felt like, I think that's a hopeful song, but it's a hard ending, and it felt like a kind of like this might be the last record we put out for a while. Like this is like, do we want to like leave that moment like somebody barely being able to choke out the word defeat because they're kind of really are questioning whether they can keep going or not? Like, is that really how you want this to end? So I think once that sort of, we decided not to put that at the end, then it was like, well, where does that go? And it is such a mammoth thing, it was certainly challenging. But I really like the way that the sequencing ended up. I think it works. I've perused some of people's ideas about like what it could, at least I can't get into like the what if all of this was recorded together, and like time skips, isn't it now, was just some sort of, I can't go there because that's not the reality. But in terms of isn't it now, I've seen some other ideas that I kind of get like why people thought that, and but
Totally.
yeah, it's always like a weird combination of like there being this like puzzle that you need to put together, and there's like a best version, and also it kind of being a little arbitrary. It's like sometimes the third song on the record feels like it's in the right place because you put it there. You know what I mean? And it, like if you'd put it seventh, it would have felt like it's supposed to be the seventh song.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know if it's always as clear as you'd think you'd want it to be. I think on some records it's maybe felt clearer than others. So this one was a little, it was a little bit of like a little hazier maybe than other records have been, and that might be something that I think is sort of the result of how things got split up, which is totally due to the pandemic, But I guess I've chosen, and I don't I actually haven't really like heard. We've been splitting up the press on this so much. Noah and I did a bunch of interviews together, so I know him and I kind of talk about it somewhat similarly. I don't know if Dave and Brian talk about it the same way, so maybe Brian had a different take on it. But I feel like I can't not say that like the pandemic had an impact on, like, you know, we've been vocal about the fact that part of the reason why we chose the songs for time skips was just literally like, oh, we can do these to a click track, you know,
Right.
and we can't do defeat to click track. Like that is a very, but I also feel, and I know Noah feels this too, that I don't like having that mean that like, oh, it's like an asterisk record, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or asterisk records. To me, I think that there's like there's a way things work out that like they end up making sense after the fact, you know, and like all of this has been part of the process. And like, you know, there's so many other types of things that, you know, songs that we work on that end up not making it past like demo stage, that, you know, there's a reason for that. And maybe the reason was because someone felt sick that day and they just actually didn't put the right energy into it. You know, it's just like there's all sorts of things that lead to these things being the way they are. And this is the way it turned out. And I think there's a lot of some sort of wisdom came through in like the records being broken up in the way that they did. So anyway.
Definitely. I would agree with that because you know, if there were songs that were going to be like left out, if it was conjoined or something like that, I would personally be bummed because like I think that they're both very special records, but they both have a very, even though the instrumentation is, you know, maybe similar more so than other, you know, sequential Animal Collective releases, I feel like there
Mhm.
is something pretty different about the two of them. Like,
Yeah.
you know, they definitely
Yeah.
stand alone. And I think you know, like speaking of the sequencing and stuff and having defeat like, you know, smack dab in the middle, I think a lot of people were like, yeah, I would expect that to be a closer or whatever. But I think having it in the middle makes sense because it's kind of unavoidable right there in the middle, right? And I think that it demands attention. So, you know, I think possibly if it was at the end and people see that it's 22 minutes, they might be like, okay, I'll listen to a bit of that or
Mm.
something. But it's there in the
Sure.
middle and you can't avoid it. And it's so, you know, captivating that I feel like having it there, even if someone was like, "Oh, wow, this is like 22 minutes," they'll still get kind of like roped into it. So I think it makes sense for it to be there.
And you know, another thing that I actually keep forgetting this, but it's because this comes up in a lot of interviews. But another thing that factors in is this, that we do vinyl, and that
Mm,
dictates certain things as well. So you have to kind
true.
of make side split decisions, and so there, you know, defeat is one side, so that could have in that sense gone, you know, first in the middle in a certain way, but it would have depended on like what songs came
Mm,
before and how you broke them up, or it could have gone at the end. And so that's part of it too. You know, it's like
right.
once we kind of um, you know, you're going to start with soul capture. Well, you only have so many minutes left on that side. So
Mm,
what goes there? It can't be defeat or whatever. So those things factor in as well. But that's true with any record. We have to think about that. Unless we would decide not to do vinyl, like campfire songs for something.
that makes sense. Yeah, and I mean, like, yeah, defeat. I feel like is kind of, well, obviously the album's titled "Isn't It Now?" after a lyric in there. I feel like it is kind of like the central, you know, it's kind of like the crown gem of this whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Greg spoke to Brian about the album title, we because I think I read in an interview somewhere a little while ago that you guys kind of like when you're kind of, you know, agreeing on an album title, there's kind of like a list, and then it kind of gets
Mm-hmm.
shorter and shorter, and then you kind of figure it out. Brian was telling us that Defeat was considered to be the name for the album before you guys settled on Isn't It Now?
Noah really wanted that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Noah was like, that was like, he was like, that's got to be called defeat. Yeah.
Were there any other titles floating around?
There were a few, but I honestly can't remember what they are right now. And even if I did, I probably would say what they were. But yeah, towards, I'm trying to think if there's anything that I can even recall that would be interesting to share. But I'm pretty sure defeat and isn't it now are kind of yeah, we're kind of the big ones. I mean, I think I think there was a moment where like we were like, well, what else could there be? And I feel like, you know, you sometimes just start like literally just grabbing at other song titles and lyrics. I might have been like, what if it was called Soul Capture or something like that, you know?
Mm,
But um I think defeat as a song really, I mean, I think you you seem to already know this, and I don't, you know, whether you heard it from Brian or whatever, but I mean, we all agree that it's like kind of the spiritual heart of the whole era. You know, I think that
mhm.
there's something about that song that just yeah. I mean, it's we you know, not realizing that the music box shows would be kind of like in a way the sort of first shows or the sort of the preamble to the first kind of writing of this whole era. We didn't even know that at the time, but Defeat was obviously a huge centerpiece of that. And then as soon as we started working on music with all four of us, and that song just always was this really powerful thing that we just, yeah, I mean, I Noah thinks I'm wrong about this. Like there must be some exception, like some show where this wasn't the case, but I'm pretty sure we played it at every single show. I mean, yeah, maybe the exception is like a festival here or there, like Desert Days. I guess we wouldn't have done it because it just, we only had 45 minutes or, you know, Pitchfork or something. But I think other than situations like that, if it was our show, we played Defeat, I think every single time. You probably can correct me, but enough. I'm close enough. And there's a reason for it. It just felt like the thing. So yeah, I think that it being the sort of source of the title kind of always made a lot of sense as well. And I don't recall any titles that were taken seriously that weren't related to that song. So
makes sense. It definitely makes sense. Yeah, it is. I can definitely say that there was at least one show where you guys didn't play Defeat, and that was here in Toronto.
Okay.
But
Sorry.
I forgive you guys because you played Stride right, and
right.
that song is, you know, I mean, I think in terms of that, it's not exactly in this like Defeats, it's a tone of its own, and it does, you know, morph throughout the whole 22 minutes. But I feel like Stride is another kind of like, you know, more melancholic song on the album. You know, the other ones maybe feel a little different, but you know, so you got Stride and you got Royal and Desire on the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you comfortable becoming like the ballad guy of the band?
The only reason why I'm not comfortable becoming the ballad guy is just that I do aspire to write different types of songs, and I'm starting to be like, all right, man, like you got this thing, you do this, all right, it's pretty good, but like pick up the tempo. Try just like a catchy chorus, maybe make someone dance or something. But yeah, no, I'm comfortable with it. I think that it's taken me a really long time to be comfortable with my literal voice, and also like my voice in terms of like what seems to matter to me lyrically, and what kind of messages I'm trying to get across. And I still, you know, I still feel self-conscious about it sometimes. But I feel like it's worked really well so far on these last couple of records, and in some ways I mean, it's been interesting doing like Why That over the last couple of years, because in some ways like the version that we've been doing live feels sort of much closer emotionally to the intention of the song than the version that ended up on Centipede Hurts, even though I like that version a lot. But I think it was like trying very hard to kind of like fit into this like angular alien world. I don't want to say at the expense of the song, but it definitely was like a different thing. And so, you know, that's also a mournful ballad in its own way, and maybe a little bit more driving than Royal and Stride. Yeah, I don't know what question I'm trying to answer now. It's meaningful to me to have these songs on these records, and it's I think it's been interesting too, and maybe this kind of goes, I think about this a little bit in terms of what I was saying earlier about sort of realizing that we've sort of cultivated this like audience of like very almost like differing, at times opposing opinions. You know, I'm very aware that my songwriting is very, very, very different from Dave and Noah's. And in some ways, I think there's a version of me, or a younger me, that would have this like critical voice of being like, you don't belong in this band. Like this doesn't fit, you know? And I think that I don't feel that anymore. I think I actually feel like this thing that we've created is always was more than sort of what it felt like in the early 2000s, even though that was an incredibly powerful and incredibly moving and incredibly, yeah, I mean, just an undeniable thing that I felt like a witness of as well. But you know, I don't know, it feels cool to feel the scope of the band broadening, and realizing that like I'm a part of that. You know, I think is interesting, and I feel grateful for, and it feels correct, I guess, to me. Others might disagree, but it feels cool to me.
I agree. I think that, you know, this album, Isn't It Now, and Time Skiffs, it's proof that you're all part of this band. Like it is such a true collective, I think, you know. Like Greg and I were talking a bit about how amazing it is to hear like your voice in particular all over this record, you know, and it's just it everyone's voice shines in these very unique ways. And I think you all, you know, as songwriters have a very unique style of approaching stuff. And that actually leads me into my next question, which is actually when you guys are writing songs, especially from a lyrical standpoint, is it safe to assume that each like, you know, lead vocalist is kind of like the lead lyrical writer as well of the songs? Do you ever kind of take turns at helping with lyric writing for other songs?
I think that's almost always exclusively the case. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's the, you know, it's very possible there are exceptions, and you know, as I'm sure you've read in other interviews or heard any of us say, we so rarely actually talk about each other's songwriting or
Mhm.
lyrics. Like we don't. It's not like we all sit down and be like, all right, man, so defeat, like, what's this about? And like this third line here, is that like, you know, so we don't actually have those conversations. So a lot of my sense of like what is, yeah, where the drive of like Dave or Noah in terms of like their songwriting comes from, like I'm not always necessarily privy to. And I guess, yeah, I guess the reason why I'm pausing is like I can't I can't speak because I wasn't there for like Painting With and Merriweather and Sung Tongs. Like it does feel at times like there's maybe even more of an exchange in those between the two of them than maybe like I'm aware of, but I don't know of any instances like that. I think it's more like you know, I mean, we've had like two songs on this last record, or you know, or Genie's Open and Prester John, which were kind of like co-written, but like really
Mhm.
just because like Noah wrote this bit and then Dave wrote that bit. But it's I'm not aware of there being any kind of like the two of them being like, all right, well, this is my lyric for this part, so you should change that to this, and if I'm writing about this, you should make the topic of yours be about that. It seems much more to me to be um, kind of like a exquisite corpse kind of thing, where it's just like, this is the bit Noah wrote and that's the bit Dave wrote, and oh look, if you just put them together like that, they work in a cool way, and like you can derive your own meaning from it, you know. So yeah, I don't think there's a ton of that I'm aware of.
Fair
um
enough.
yeah, yeah, if you talked to Dave and Noah, it's possible that they would have exceptions to that based on different eras of what we've done where they maybe were like kind of writing for each other or something, but I'm not aware of that happening.
Fair enough. I mean, it still sounds like really cohesive. Is, you know, the a kind of I think an even more amazing thing if each, you know, sort of songwriter is kind of just taking their own thing. It really shows how the band complements each other, because it doesn't sound out of place when, you know, the lead vocalist switches into the next
Mm-hmm.
cut of the song. It sounds like the same band. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys, I think, you know, it shows like that your bond together is obviously very strong, and your instincts work very much in your favor. Um, but yeah, I mean, like, you know, while I'm on the topic of praising you, I just wanted to make mention Stride Right and Royal and Desire. I mean, Stride Right, if you know, if you check the forums, I think is widely being recognized as like one of the fan favorites of this album, of this era. And Royal and Desire was, I believe, on the list of top tracks of 2022 from Pitchfork. You know, and
Cool.
it's not even a single, so I think that, you know, speaks volumes to what you're lending to this band, and lending to that kind of sound. It's definitely resonating with a lot of people. So and myself included, I love those songs so much. Royal and Desire was like, I mean, from the inception of Down 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 into that,
Mm-hmm.
I remember when you came to Toronto with Gang Gang Dance,
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was
play
doing
you
that song then.
played that song, and that, like, that was it was fantastic in that iteration. But to hear it turn into Royal and Desire, I mean, that song is very moving, very moving.
Thank you very
So
much. I appreciate that. I mean, it means a
yeah,
lot to hear.
I'm just saying it like how it is, you know. So thank you. All right. I know that you teased some Instagram posts about releasing a new solo album, sort of more
Hmm.
piano based. Is there any updates on when we can expect to hear anything from
No,
that?
I'm far, yeah, far too far too on brand to say that it's still very early stages, and I haven't actually started recording anything yet. I think it's going to be more piano based, but I don't really know. I feel like once I kind of start digging into something, it can kind of like evolve. The piano has just kind of been the instrument that's been the most sort of like instantaneously engaging for me right these past few years, especially. Like I feel like I just 9 times out of 10 when I go in my studio, it's kind of where I want to sit. And I think I've been kind of wanting to, a lot of songs that I wrote early on were oftentimes the result of me like making a sampled loop and sort of writing melody over top of a loop. And I found that to be an incredibly inspiring way to write, but also kind of limiting and sort of gets you kind of paint yourself into a corner. And so for many years now, it's not like just recently, but I think that I there's something about, maybe I'm leaning even further to the point of just really wanting to be like, I play a chord, I choose a melody. It's like, it's a very direct relationship that I can shift gears with really easily. So that's just kind of been the most inspiring way to write. I don't actually know if that'll end up being, I'm sure piano will play a big role in whatever the next record is, but I don't know if it'll be like, there's times where I've been like, it literally, I could imagine doing like a piano songwriter record with like very minimal, additional instrumentation to, it being as full on as, stuff I've done before. So it's hard to say. I have a bunch of new stuff for sure. A handful of songs which feel like close to being written, and a handful more that feel a lot more kind of amorphous. And then there's a whole back catalog of stuff, some of which even goes back to way back in the day that I sometimes think I would like to that I never recorded and would like to kind of see if I can kind of pull it up and resuscitate it, and probably with like a new feeling and a new bent. But kind of there's definitely some melodies from a long time ago that are kind of still in my head, and I kind of go back to now and again. So and yeah, I intended to kind of be a lot further along this year than I am, but it's just been a busy year. And so yeah, I don't know, I'm playing a couple shows in November with Dave and Brian. Like we're doing like 3 solo sets at the same show in Asheville, and so that'll probably be a good impetus for me to kind of get some things a little bit more solidified. And then I'm heading out to Portugal to help Noah record his next record, sort of as like an engineer / producer. Nice. And so that'll kind of be my focus, like for kind of up until the holidays, other than the getting ready for my shows. So I would imagine at this point it's more about when I get back kind of post holidays that I will be hopefully at that point have some more solid sense of like what songs I want to record and actually start getting into doing it for real. Yeah, it's ridiculous that it's taken this long. I don't understand how I keep doing this to myself. I'm an incredibly slow human being. It's pretty wild. But
well, all good things take time, and I think sleep cycle is definitely proof that you just take all the time you want, because the stuff you're coming up with is fantastic. So I think I can speak for all the fans when I say we're cool with waiting.
Well, I appreciate that, but I also it'd be cool for my life to move a little bit faster. As you get into these mid 40s, I'm about to be 46. It's you're a little bit more aware of the length of the road ahead of you. So
fair enough.
It feels like time to move a little quicker than I have been.
All right. Well,
but
I'm stoked to hear it whenever it comes out. So,
thank you.
I got a couple more questions for you here.
Sure.
So, let's say someone's getting into Animal Collective for the first time. What's the introductory album?
I mean, this kind of goes back to what I was saying. I just like at this point, I'm not even really sure if I have a clear answer for that, because I read and meet fans who are like, I came into this band because of Centipede Hurts, and it's like that's the best record you guys ever made. And I'm like, right, well, go read the articles from 2012 when it came out. You stand apart from everyone else. So I guess
tough question, huh?
I don't know. This is like I think my true answer is what I just said, and I kind of actually really like that people would literally, like, somebody would be like, I got into this band because of, I don't know, transverse temporal gyrus or something, and why don't they make another record like that? But I don't know. Maybe I would say Strawberry Jam, maybe, to me. But
I think
it's
a fair answer.
Just because I think I feel like it kind of it feels like kind of like a linchpin in the middle of like a lot of different energies that we had. It doesn't touch everything, but it touches a lot of it. And I think with even though, I mean, it's a yeah, it's a wild one to reference because I think it was a tough one for all of us, but it just has something going on that I feel like is yeah, you're probably, if you like something in there, you're gonna want to check out what else is going on. And I feel like in some ways, yeah, weirdly, I feel like that's like one of the this is, I don't mean this to sound so negative. It's not negative, but maybe that's one of the issues with Merriweather, is that I think that it does something that, though if you know us and know the soul of who we are, like you hear it in everything else that we do. But I think for certain people, it was like it had a certain sheen to it that, like, because it doesn't really exist quite in that way anywhere else, everything else feels like it's not that. And I don't know, like, I don't think feels does that to people. I don't think, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just babbling.
I get you though.
I think people should spin a wheel, and wherever the wheel lands,
Sure.
that's what they should listen to first.
Yeah, I mean strawberry jam is a good answer, I think, because like it's got a little bit of everything, and you're right. If people can latch onto something there's definitely something in all the rest of the records that will work for them. Now here's another loaded question for you. So desert island question, but it's with your band members' solo projects. One of each. You can only take one record with you to the desert island to listen to forever. Which ones are you taking with you?
Ooh, that is really tough. I would say, for Dave, I think I guess I'm going to say Down There. I think it's Down There. I think that one, like, has always been, there's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it is self-serving, but it's either Down There or it's Eucalyptus. It's one of the ones that I recorded. I just feel like they're like the most, there's something like through and through that kind of cut to like a very deep soul of Dave's that I love very much. And it comes through in Animal Collective records sometimes as well. I mean, in some ways always does, but it's this very particular kind of like emotional depth and vulnerability that I think on both those records is there. And I happen to really like the way they sound. And with Noah, what do I want to say? I guess I want to say, I don't know. It might actually be Tomboy. Might be
Nice.
Tomboy. I think that I mean, I know Person Pitch in some ways is like a very obvious answer that many people would give, and I think for really good reason. And it's a really stunning work on a lot of levels. But I feel like I'm gonna get myself in trouble for this one. I feel like Person Pitch is like maybe like the last record of like his childhood or something. It's like it's which is, childhood is beautiful. But it's like there's Tomboy was like this moment where I think he was trying to really like ground himself into like who he is as a songwriter, and a certain type of like self ownership, maybe even especially outside of the group, which Person pitches too. But I don't know. Tomboy feels like it's like this kind of, yeah, I don't know. It just really feels like Noah to me. And I mean, I've spent time with. It's really crazy, actually. I just was with Noah in Lisbon, and I was helping him kind of organize his studio because that's where we're going to record the next record. And he has like a lot of stuff there. They're just like accumulated, including like boxes of stuff that he's like got from his mom's old house when she moved. And so he has all these boxes of like cassette tapes, a lot of which are like the old 4-track tapes from when we were like fucking 13 years old. And
Wow.
I've been listening to that human being, Jesus Christ, I almost started crying, make music in a way that I found really pretty stunning since I was 12, 13 years old. I guess 13 years old.
That's incredible.
It's pretty crazy. And I mean, I hear him through everything that we've done, including all the stuff with Animal Collective. But yeah, I don't know. Tomboy somehow feels like it's like this kind of, it's really him. It's not Animal Collective. It's like, that's Noah. And I think that he is an incredible member of Animal Collective, and is obviously like an irreplaceable voice in like what this group is. But I think there's a him that exists outside of it. And I think that maybe through a lot of the 2000s, like that didn't really get to exist. And it came out through what he would do on Songs, or kind of and obviously again like 100% him. But I think that there's something in Tomboy that feels like very personal to him. With Brian, man, it's tough. There's I would almost cheat a little bit on this one and say that in general, like the Tape Chance series that him and Dave did together, I think is
Right.
like fucking stunning. Like I don't remember which one I think it was Tape Chance for Spring that they played for us when we were in 2019 when we first got together to like work on this era of music in the like Tennessee sessions or whatever.
Mhm.
And they had finished Tape Chance. I think it was the spring one. And we had like finished the day of practicing and eating dinner, and then they were like, "You guys want to hear it?" And we had a PA set up in the room that we were playing in, but it was like also just our living room. And so I just laid down on the floor with my eyes closed, and might have been one of the rare times. I don't really like smoke weed that much anymore because it's not good for my brain. But I think I might have that night, and I just think it sounds incredible. And as much as I think Brian really gets to shine on Animal Collective Records in general, and is such a huge part of how we are who we are, like in a just irreplaceable way. I feel like there's something that when it's a project like that, it just is even more like apparent, like how kind of brilliant he is with that kind of stuff. So that's what I would pick. But I yeah, I also kind of feel like what am I trying to say? Like he's still he hasn't made his like best record yet, like on his
Right.
own. Like I feel like that's like I think that him like playing solo recently in the
Mhm.
last couple of years is like sort of a newish muscle for him, and I think he's really coming into his own in that way. So I'm kind of really excited to see like what he does with that. Him and I have been doing a lot of soundtrack work the last few
Mhm.
years, like scoring films. We've done him and I have done three together, only one of which included Dave, but two of them have just been the two of us, Crestone and this movie Jetty that hasn't really come out yet, but we just finished over the summer. And he's yeah, he's kind of just really brilliant when it comes to like just making these kind of like incredible soundscapes. So anyway, yeah, my answer is Tape Chance for Spring, which technically is also him and Dave, but I'm giving Brian a lot of credit for that. So
Awesome. Great answers. Okay, so my final question here, and kind of answered it along the way, is, what's next for Animal Collective? What's next for you guys? A solo project sounds like the most immediate thing for you is working on this record with Noah. Is that I know that title Sinister Grift has been jumping around the fan forums for years. Is that what this project is?
I don't know if he'll stick with that name or not. I haven't actually had that conversation with him, but yeah, that's what this is.
Cool.
Um,
Those are some of
yeah.
those songs that he played in Madrid like a couple years ago.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Cool. And
Yeah,
then
and some newer stuff.
sweet. And then you've got time presumably to work on your stuff next year, but Animal Collective are not going to be touring or putting out an album for a little while.
Yeah, it's going to be a minute. Yeah, we're kind of
Okay.
we're moving into one of those moments. Yeah, I think just everyone needs like some space to be focused in other places before we kind of get back together. I mean, at the same time, you never know. It's really always hard to say, and I feel like whenever the kind of the gears start clicking is never really predictable. I mean, I don't think. Um, I mean, I guess it was very much like it took a long time, but I don't think like when me, Dave, and Brian worked on the Tangerine Reef stuff together, and then that didn't lead directly to, but sort of piggybacked with us doing the music box stuff. In some ways, either of those projects could have been, or neither of them could have been, sort of the beginning of us starting to talk about what would be next. But it turned out that the music box was, or music box
Right.
was. So you never really know. I think we like to kind of leave things. I think we like to get to that place where the moment when it's going to feel like there's a reason to have that conversation again is because it's for an organic reason. So yeah, I think I definitely need to record a record. It's really important to me. I would feel like I was doing myself a disservice if I didn't do that before we got to our next thing. I know Noah wants to record a record. I haven't heard Dave talking about recording a new record, and at the same time, like he's literally just always writing. So who knows? Who knows? He may be sitting on one and he hasn't told anybody. And yeah, and me and Brian and to some degree Dave are wanting to continue to be doing score work as well. Some of which is just an economic thing, but it happens to be something that we enjoy doing. So that's cool. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, some other things that are in the works that that are definitely like group related, but nothing that would be like the next album or something. I think we're just kind of trying to find ways that we can sort of continue to feel like we can make things and share them with people in a way that feels engaged and engaging for us, and kind of allows for us to kind of continue to produce things at the rate we seem to produce things, which doesn't always fit with like the larger album cycle kind of realities. And so we're kind of trying to figure out if there's some ways that we can do that in a way that is a little bit more consistent or something. And that's kind of so yeah.
Cool. Well, that's it's super exciting. Whatever you guys do, I'm always there for it. Is this this documentary that you guys scored, Jetty? Is that something that might come out in a physical form, kind of like Crestone or The Inspection?
I'm not sure actually. I mean, the film director hasn't even really hit festivals yet. So there's sort of like it wouldn't make any sense to release it as a score until it becomes sort of a viable film on its own. And the first process in trying to get to that place is just sending it out to festivals and having it play at some places and see if it gets picked up by a distributor or something. So there's a whole process he would have to go through first before that would even be a thing. But if it does, at some point, I would hope so. It's certainly, I think that Brian and I feel pretty psyched about like what we made, and I think we like the idea of when we make scores to have them be something that's available for people in some form. So yeah, but I don't think it'll be anytime soon, just because like I said, he's got to go through the whole festival cycle, and that can take months, or it might even be like a year or something. So but
sweet. Well, yeah, like I said, I'm there for it no matter what comes out. You guys have done a fantastic job with Isn't It Now. This era of songs is just, I think, like some of the most cohesive work that you guys have done as a band, and it really showcases all of your individual skills and everything that you bring to the table. Is that no music videos for this album? Are there going to be some music videos?
There's no music videos for this album. Yeah. My answer for that will be pretty dissatisfying, I think. But they're just a weird thing. I think we end up feeling like this weird tension between it being this thing we're supposed to do, but it's always it's a budget thing. And then the truth is I don't think we're always as satisfied with our videos as we want to be. So there's sort of this thing of like I think we've just kind of been a little like burned with the process a few times, and for whatever reason, this particular time around, like it was very difficult to get any momentum going within the group for any enthusiasm, and it just felt like anything we were going to do was going to just feel like destined to be a disappointment or something, which is not you don't want to make stuff that way. So I sort of wish there had been, in the sense that like I totally get the purpose that they serve, and I know it gets people psyched, but it just never really materialized. That's the best answer that I have. They just kind of disappeared.
There's not going to be a 22-minute short film for the music video of Defeat.
No, I mean there could have been, should have been. I don't know, but I don't know how. Yeah, it's just the idea of like how to. I mean, it's certainly that idea came up, but it's a surprisingly winding and weird road between like having an idea like that and actually like figuring out how to fund it and budget it and execute it and do all of that in a way that feels like we're actually going to be psyched about the end product. I think it just felt ultimately this time, every time it came up, it just felt a little bit too daunting, which feels a little weird to acknowledge, but it's the only true answer I can give. So
well,
not this time around.
Appreciate the honesty with that. But I think the music speaks for itself. So if it's audio that we have for this album cycle, I think everyone's more than satisfied with that. Josh, Deakin, I have to thank you immensely for taking the time to speak with me and share your answers to my questions. Nothing but love for you guys and the band and the music. It's incredible. I've been listening to you guys for over 20 years, and I'm going to continue to. And the fan base, sometimes they're a little hardcore, a little nutty, but we all very much feel that the music, hits some spot inside of us that really, don't want to get too sappy, but I feel like, really it affects us all in a way that brings the community together. It's a beautiful thing, that's what I'm trying to say.
It's awesome. No, I'm very appreciative of it, and I'm glad you guys all exist. So thanks for caring so much, and absolutely thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it, Jordan. It's been a pleasure.
All right, so there you have it. There you heard it, right here on a Musician and a Filmmaker podcast. That was Greg with his Brian Weitz, aka Geologist interview, me with Josh Dibb, aka Deakin. Join us next episode where we will be talking, just Greg and I, about our thoughts on the new Animal Collective album, Isn't It Now? We'll go in depth. Spoiler, we love the album a lot, but we'll really get into why that is. So join us next time, Musician and Filmmaker.
Let's invite all the songs that we wrote so we know and let them go. And she's lying side